Chapter 21. Kai's Turn. Kaismo, snickered Nicholas. Yes, Nicky, Kai retorted. The laughter instantly silenced. Fair enough. Good luck. Giving him a wide grin, Ashley finally let go of Kai's arm. There were whispers all around as he walked towards the large, imposing instructor. He couldn't hear what they were saying. His heart was pounding loudly, both from the nerves and excitement. Instructor Sven stood firm. Oddly, the sword he had used the entire time was missing as Kai settled into the spot opposite him. Settling his nerves, he took a few deep breaths. Sven kept assessing Kai even further after he had made it to the ring. Human. Not surprising. Cineris, is your brother Garen Cineris? Sven asked. Kai paused for a second, then nodded. Makes sense, he might know my brother. He does use a sword as well, so it's very likely he took this same course. You know Garen? Sven nodded his bald head. Your brother was one of the finest swordsmen I've ever trained. He has great potential. A wicked grin came to his face. He also mentioned you. Kai could hear louder whispers now. Cineris, the only commoner winner of the end-of-year tournament so far. Dragging his sword out of the sheath, Kai bent his knees slightly, settling into a stance. He held the sword with both hands on the grip, the tip pointed at Instructor Sven. Nice sword. Also bending his knees lightly, a new weapon appeared in Sven's hands. A dull-looking staff made entirely of brown and silver-looking wood. It wasn't completely straight in its 2-metered length. It looked knobby, as if it was a tree branch cut straight down and left untrimmed, instead of a proper weapon. A stick or a staff? Does he know I'm not used to fighting against a staff? Is that why he changed? Branch. Well, that's new. The instructor's stance gave away nothing other than the fact he was relaxed. His staff branch stood against the ground like a walking stick. Kai towed over slowly, taking deliberate steps with care as he narrowed the distance. He knew he was going to be at a range disadvantage soon. His reach was much smaller, so he had to get inside the instructor's maximum range, but not so close that he couldn't swing his sword. At least that was what his training had told him, but he knew it wouldn't be that easy. As if he blinked, the staff vanished from its position and appeared right in front of his face. Dipping his head left on reflex, he dodged the staff, his hair blowing in the wind as it passed by his head. Sven drew back to release another strike. Not giving him a chance to strike again, Kai moved in quickly, swinging from his right, only for the strike to be blocked by the staff as if it had teleported once more, predicting his telegraphed strike. Sven was using his incredible higher stat to his advantage, not that he couldn't truly make himself less than what he was. He moved the staff with lightning speed to block and strike. Ducking, Kai dodged a near headshot, the staff passing right over his hair. He countered by jabbing the sword at Sven's stomach while he was low, only for the instructor to take a step back and widen the distance between them so it favored him again. Kai dodged the low sweep at his legs, forcing him to jump up and towards Sven or else be kept at a distance. Positioned overhead, he swung down with all his raw power at the unprepared instructor. A smile on Sven's face as his staff and hands moved to intercept the strike once again. A resounding clap echoed out as metal sword met wooden staff. A small stalemate ensued as instructor and student pushed against each other in a power struggle. During the pushing contest, Kai could feel a small hum in the air. The gravity seemed to be vibrating all around him as if it wanted to help. He ignored the feeling, knowing this match had to be won or lost without magic. They pushed at each other for 30 seconds, with no ground being won or lost. Witnessing Sven smirking, Kai knew the balance would be broken. His arms and hands trembled, muscles screaming at him as he began being pushed back. Sven's arms and hands were as steady as an unmovable mountain as he pushed his staff against Kai's sword. Breaking the stalemate, Kai took a quick step back, dropping his left arm to his side as he flung his grandfather's knife at the instructor's chest, only to have it bounce off, doing nothing to him or his clothing. Patting his shirt where the knife landed, Sven's eyes changed. Gone was the grinning, smirking man, a more serious expression took over. Mild killing intent radiated from Sven, but it was enough to give Kai pause. Shit. For the next 5 minutes, Instructor Sven began changing up his combat style from jabs and swings to a more mobile style of staff technique. His staff moved with speed and precision which Kai struggled to keep up with. He would occasionally get gently tapped on the forearm or leg. The flowing staff would spin and twirl into one strike and the next, an unbroken chain of attacks, pressing Kai on the defensive. Any counter Kai could manage would be instantly countered back with the opposite end of the staff. His hand began to become slick, the sweat making it more difficult to hold firmly. A flurry of blows finally sealed the deal when a hit landed on the back of Kai's sword hand, forcing him to drop his beloved sword. Kneeling on one knee, Kai couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. He was exhausted as his entire body was full of sweat, having been pushed to both his physical and mental limits. The only sound he could hear was his breathing and rapid heartbeat. Blinking, he grabbed his sword and stood up. Sven's staff was gone. The serious expression, now one of curiosity and contemplation. How strange. You're rough, Kai. Your techniques and style are lacking compared to your brothers, but you have much better battle instincts. How strange indeed. Kai could only shrug. My father and I would spar occasionally. He supplied a plausible lie, with a face of skepticism. Did he ever use a staff in your spars? Only a few times, though it's not his preferred weapon, Kai admitted. In truth, he had relied on instinct and his experience much of the fight. It was all he could do to react to Sven's precise attacks. And he knew Sven was holding back considerably to the point where Kai could only barely react to the staff. Since he had spared with his father, he was somewhat used to fighting opponents faster and stronger. But that was only without magic. Once magic entered the fights, it changed the dynamics of the fight entirely. Do you have a passive perception skill then? Not yet, Kai replied. You have a solid foundation of the basics, which combined with your battle instincts makes you formidable. And yet, you don't seem to have a specific style as if it was intentional. With a shake of his head, Sven seemed to decide to ignore the abnormality. I have high expectations for you, Kai. You will be placed in Group S. Holding his hand out, he passed Kai's knife to him. Sheathing his sword and knife, Kai bowed lightly. Thank you for the spar. He felt a little self-conscious under all the stares he was receiving. The adrenaline was beginning to wear off. New aches formed in his legs and arms. His breathing had returned to normal, but he couldn't help sucking in air when a cold breeze flowed against the welt forming on the back of his hand where the instructor had smacked him. Stamina, 51 out of 250. Looking at his stat sheet, he noticed he had gone through a lot of his stamina. That made sense. He had been fighting at his max for over 5 minutes straight without pause or rest. You did amazing, Ashley yelled, running up to him with an infectious smile on her face, making Kai smile as well. Wow, that was impressive, she purred, running a hand down his arm. Even with his lack of stamina, he considered the fight a win in his books. He had been able to hold out against an unfamiliar weapon and was placed in the highest category among the other students. Still, he couldn't deny he had a lot to learn and a style to learn. Nicholas gave Kai an appraising look. Damn, that was entertaining. Man, you should have seen Instructor Sven's face the second your knife hit his chest. I'm sure he let it happen, but I think even he was surprised you would fling a knife at him in the middle of a duel like an assassin, he said, laughing. Feeling killing intent radiating behind him, Kai turned his head and saw Jason staring at him with fury in his eyes. Just from the look in his eyes, he could tell there would be payback for doing better and embarrassing him. Kai just stared back unperturbed, ready for the challenge. Nicholas swung his arm around Kai's shoulder. Worried? A little. He doesn't look like the type of guy to forget grudges, Kai responded. Well, let's add a little fuel to that funeral pyre then, Ashley smirked as she sauntered over to Jason. All the male's eyes followed her. Ashley's step and hip movements were exaggerated, knowing she had an audience. You lost the bet. Hand them over. Ashley held out her palm expectantly. Jason appeared conflicted. He doesn't have the skills to be in Group S. You heard the instructor. Not my problem. Why don't you take it up with Sven if you disagree with his placement? Ashley said with a knowing smirk. With eyes of promised vengeance, Jason unstrapped both boots before ripping them off and shoving them into her hands. An instant later, he summoned another pair of brown leather boots from what Kai assumed was his storage ring. Ashley's smile widened, taunting the angry noble before she dismissively turned back to Kai and Nicholas. Stopping for a moment, she turned to Jason and winked. I guess you'll have to work harder to earn my forgiveness. Who is she? Kai whispered to Nicholas, his eyes still on the entertainment before him. She is, let's just say her status in the kingdom is greater than my own. Surprised, Kai turned his head to see Nicholas's mouth was a thin line. His demeanor told Kai that it wasn't a joke. Let's just say that not even the king can tell me what to do, Ashley said as she approached, obviously hearing Nicholas's response. Locking eyes with Kai, she moved to him before saying, "For you," as she held out Jason's boots. Kai was speechless at how brazen and obvious she was being. Her intentions were clear on her face, a mischievous smirk as she added more fire to Jason's hatred. He could feel killing intent being focused on him from multiple sources, but it was definitely strongest from where Ashley just walked from. I don't think I can accept those. Thank you, however, Kai denied, trying not to become enemy number one. No, I insist. You did so well, I think you deserve a reward. Also, I couldn't have won the bet without you. Ashley smiled sweetly, humor dancing in her eyes. Besides, I can't wear these. It will clash with my style. Not to mention I have better stuff than this. Kai looked down at the boots. They were a combination of hardened leather and metal. Scaly, light grey leather covered the entire outside of the boots. No obvious glyphs or enchantments showed on them, but they did appear very high quality and well made. Not that Kai was an expert. Boots, Aerowolf leather, enchanted. Enchantments, durability +6, self-clean, resize. The enchantments were likely to be hidden out of sight, one sign of high-quality work. Any idea what an Aerowolf is? Nope. You will have to ask someone knowledgeable, maybe at the local guild or armor shop. Or, you could ask Jason, she teased. Kai sighed. Such a dilemma. I'm being used to make Jason angrier for nothing but her fun and enjoyment, but I really am lacking gear. Whatever the asshat already hates me. With a roll of his eyes, Kai hesitantly reached out, picking up the boots. With no ring of storage, he decided to put them on right there. Sensing danger, he looked to Jason. If glares could kill, he chuckled to himself. Thank you, he spoke softly, looking back to Ashley. I just hope accepting these isn't like accepting a marriage proposal. You're most welcome. I'm glad you didn't disappoint. I really didn't want to forgive that slimy bastard. Jason's teeth gnashed together as he stared at Kai and Ashley with a deadly cold glare. Kai couldn't lie, he got immense satisfaction from seeing Jason like that, but he was certain he just made an enemy for the rest of the duration at this academy. They fit like they were made for me. Kai couldn't help but taunt the frothing noble. Nicholas started shaking with laughter. A few other brave people joined in. The rest of the students finished up their spar with Instructor Sven. He looked fresh and unruffled, as if the last few hours of combat meant nothing to him. By the end, a total of 6 people had made it into Group S, including Kai, Ashley, and Nicholas. Instructor Sven had only used the odd staff during his fight with Kai. Class, Sven boomed, next session, I want you to get together with your group and instructor and begin your training. If your group's instructor believes you are capable of moving up into the next group, then you will be allowed to join the next group. For those of you in Group S, there will be no moving up. Dismissed. Chapter 22. Training. Kai, you're famous. What do you mean? Kai asked, confused. His 2 roommates had ambushed him the moment he stepped inside his dorm room. Everyone was talking about it at dinner. Andre waved his hands excitedly. They were saying you were talking to Prince Nicholas and Lady Ashley. That a commoner was chatting with 2 of the highest-ranking nobles in the kingdom. Andre got even more animated. Lady Ashley even gave you a magic item. She's absolutely gorgeous. I had a class with her, and let me tell you it was hard to concentrate in there. While Kai agreed she was very attractive, there had been something off about her. Not only that, but you also made Group S on the first try. Something only a handful of commoners have done till now, including your brother, who apparently won the 3rd-year tournament. Why didn't you say anything? Kai put a hand on Andre's shoulder. Chill and take a breath. I didn't want to mention it because my plan was to be low-key and pass under everyone's notice until the final tournament. I didn't want to become a target, which, now that I think about it, was ruined by a very well-timed burp. He bore his eyes onto the fox, who was in bed napping. But Kai knew better by now. There was the slightest uptilt in her lips that he knew for certain to be a hidden smile. We couldn't believe the rumors at dinner. A few people were coming up to us and asking about you. We didn't know what to tell them. By the way, where were you during dinner? Both you and Ashley were missing, asked Hector, waggling his eyebrows suggestively. Even the usually composed young man couldn't hide the interest and excitement in his eyes. Whoa, slow down. I can't speak for Ashley, but I missed dinner because I went to the library after the melee training class and fell asleep. You fell asleep in the library? They both asked in unison, skepticism laced in their voice. Yay, there wasn't anyone else there, and I ended up closing my eyes. It wasn't until the librarian woke me up at the closing time and kicked me out. Both Andre and Hector gave him a judging stare. Look, everyone deserves a good nap occasionally. Akane is on her 5th of the day. Kai pointed to the faux sleeping fox. On cue, she snored. What about Prince Nicholas and Lady Ashley? What about them? Nicholas seems like a nice person. And Ashley, I think I'm out of my depth with her. I don't know why she approached me, but it makes me think she wants something. Maybe she likes you. She did give you those boots. Andre squatted down next to Kai. He ran a hand over the material, letting out a whistle. Any idea what Aerowolf is? No, more like she was using me to play games and have fun. Kai recalled Nicholas claiming Ashley was above him in status, but he had never found out the reason behind that. Hector, what do you know about Ashley? Kai asked. Hector was the closest thing to a noble amongst his roommates. He would be Kai's best source of knowledge about the upper-tier echelon of the nobility. Not too much, just that she and her grandfather are treated like royalty in our king. Right as Hector was about to finish answering a knocking at the door, interrupted their conversation. Walking over, Kai opened it. Another student stood at the door, bags in hand. His bright red hair stood out against his dark green eyes. Dirt and smudges covered his clothing and face as if he had been traveling for days without a wash or rest. The red-haired student gave a stiff smile. Sorry to interrupt. I believe I am your new roommate. Silently, Kai held the door open a little wider, gesturing for the student to come in. Walking towards the last remaining empty bed, the student plunked his bags down. He looked around briefly before turning to the trio, who remained steadily staring at him silently. Coughing once, Kai nudged Andre in the ribs. As if waking up from a stupor, Andre walked up to the new student. Nice to meet you. Name's Andre Belton of the Belton Merchant Group. That's Hector and Kai. I'm Sean, he said quietly. Human, Foundation Level 14. Sean looked very uncomfortable standing there as he was scrutinized by his new roommates. His fidgeting became more pronounced the longer he was being observed. Where you from? Andre asked after an awkward amount of silence had passed. I'm from a port city south. Screaming, Sean backpedaled until he stopped against a dresser. Halfway inside his bag, tossing items out, was Akane. Running over, Kai grabbed at Akane, pulling her out of his new roommate's bag. Free of the bag, everyone could see her mouth moving rhythmically up and down as she ate and swallowed something. My rations. Sean looked dejected. Does the fox belong to you? Kai's new roommate took it with less grace than the others. Yay, he answered. Akane was paddling through the air, grasped in Kai's hands as she tried to escape over to Sean's bag. Akane, relax. She didn't. I'm sorry, I don't know what is going on with her, Kai apologized. Akane's behavior was extremely unusual. Akane, stop, or I won't take you to the cafeteria anymore. With the threat of delicious food being taken away, Akane immediately stopped paddling. She looked at Kai. His slitted pupils were now wide in fear. Nodding her head, tiny tears dripped from her eyes and her ears drooped to the side of her face. She looked utterly depressed. Then it hit him. He has missed dinner, and he had no idea if Akane had gotten food with the others since she hadn't been with him in the library. Guys, was Akane at dinner? Nope, never saw her, Hector replied, his eyes going large in understanding. After a few days, they all understood the fox's appetite by now. It made a little more sense why she was acting out. The gluttonous fox was probably starving after not eating for whole 10 hours. "I'm sorry once again. I forgot to feed her," Kai explained to Sean, who looked somewhere between shocked and terrified. "She won't be doing that again," Kai said loudly for the benefit of Sean, but his words were meant for the naughty fox. Akane dejectedly hung limply in Kai's arms, soundly defeated by the threat of withholding food. "I have to go, guys. If I don't get this fox some proper food, we'll all be in danger." Almost an entire week had passed since Kai's arrival at the Ashbourne Academy. During the past week, Kai had gained 1 level randomly. The level came from his body slowly absorbing the ambient mana in the atmosphere and fusing into his body. This was the main method used by non-combatants to level up. The process itself was extremely slow, taking decades to level from Foundation Level 1 as a non-combatant to Forging Level 1. The variables are dependent on a variety of factors, but mana density was the main component. The higher level a person was, the longer it would take in between levels until eventually they just stopped leveling up naturally because it took too long between levels and would die before then. Kai ended up putting the 5 stats into strength, bringing it up to a solid 50. It was their first day off from classes and Kai found himself on the training field. He was restless to use his magic as he wished to grow more familiar with it. The field was the only area students could use magic unsupervised as long as it wasn't against other students. There were about 24 students on the field, but everyone was separated enough not to bother the others. Starting with light exercises, he moved his body and sword in quick drills his father had taught him. He swung with slow precision, keeping his form steady throughout the training. Next, he trained inside one of his gravity pillars. The unseen pressure tried to buckle his back and knees, but he stood strong against it. He continued the forms, but this time slower. A thought occurred during his training. What if I activate Pillar and Domain on someone? Would the abilities stack? The only problem was he couldn't test it on other students, leaving only himself or Akane. "Akane, I'm going to activate Domain. Leave the area for a minute. I don't want you to be under the increased gravity," when the lazy fox merely opened a single eye at him before closing it. He took that as a sign to do his worst. Already under his gravity pillar, which was steadily draining his mana, he used Domain. Immediately his mana started dwindling faster than ever. He was correct in his suspicions. The gravity abilities did not stack gravitational force. The force of gravity is determined by my intelligence stat. It makes sense since each spell has the same modifier. After all, I'm not summoning 2 fireballs, but affecting the same pull of gravity. He spied Akane unperturbed by the increased gravity, napping away as if nothing had happened. He quickly turned off both abilities as his mana reached the halfway point. Next, he began using his last active ability. Starting with Heavy Blow, he practiced his sword swing in combination with the magic. The weight of the sword grew as an unseen pressure descended upon it every time the magic was activated. The sudden onset of weight and momentum nearly ripped the sword from his hands every time, even when he knew it was coming. Only through his practice and expectation of the increase in weight and momentum could he catch himself from dropping it most of the time. Furrowing his brows, he was aware this would pose a problem in actual life and death combat if he had to catch himself from dropping his sword every time. He wanted to know how much faster and heavier his sword swing was, but there was no way to measure it without precision instruments. If Kai had to approximate, it was nearly twice more powerful than his normal strike. But that was only a guess. After practicing chopping downwards a few times, Kai decided to test his horizontal swings. But he had miscalculated. Without the ground to break his sword's momentum, his blade ended up ripping out of his hands and went soaring through the air like a spinning blade of death. He watched on in speechless horror as the spinning sword ended up falling near a student, nearly hitting them on the way down until a barrier of rock appeared out of thin air, stopping it. Akane, who had been supposedly sleeping until now, was rolled over onto her back, snickering with laughter. Kai briefly gave her a death stare before witnessing the student grab the sword embedded in the manifested rocks. Running up to him, Kai immediately apologized. The student looked amused more than upset. "I was not expecting to get decapitated today. Perhaps wait until I've at least had one last good meal," the student joked lightly. He had a knowing smirk on his face. He had dark brown eyes and the beginning of a pale beard that matched his wheat-colored hair. Human Forging Level 71. Kai whistled in his mind. Must be a third-year student. I am sorry again. My magic is tricky. I should have expected that to happen. Kai apologized once more, this time giving a light bow. The student brought his hands together and then apart. The earth rumbled momentarily before a wall made of dirt and stone rose from the ground in front of the two. It stopped a few meters high and was nearly a meter wide. Please face the wall when practicing your swings. Oh, and do me a favor. If your sword is cruising through the air again, maybe a little warning next time. The earth magic student winked before walking over to where Kai had originally been practicing. Kai reached up and covered his face with his hand, giving a solemn nod in response. How embarrassing. By the time he dragged his hand down, the student had already begun his training once again as stones rotated around the now floating student. Akane stood next to him, imitating his accident by winding up her front right leg and flinging it outwards in a motion as Kai had done. Except she kept repeating it, laughing the entire time. Ignoring the giggling fox's laughter, Kai kept trying his horizontal swing. The first dozen swings, he lost his grip. Each time his sword would embed itself into the rock wall. He noticed one critical thing about his heavy blow ability during the training. The weapon he used would gain weight suddenly when using the ability, but only during the swing. Once the swing was completed, the weight would vanish instantly, like a cut thread, the pressure on the weapon gone. Gravity seemed to be pulling on the weapon in the direction it was headed, giving it additional weight and momentum to strike harder. While this made his attack much stronger, it also made it difficult to control, which was obvious from the number of times the sword had flown out of his grip. After horizontal swings, he decided to attempt stabbing with heavy blow. To say it was a failure would be an understatement. The sword had actually shot out of his hands when he thrust forwards. The few times he had actually managed to keep his hands on the handle, he had to take a few steps forwards to compensate, or else he would fall flat on his face. The feeling was as if the sword had teleported half a meter forward with his hands still attached, throwing him completely off balance. Without a doubt, it was something to continue to work on, much like everything else. He decided to call it a day when his sword had sunk far into the rock wall. The tip of the blade was visible through the other side, with the crossguard pressed against the rock. It took considerable effort to pull it out, which prompted another wave of laughter from Akane, the Earth Mage, and the other students who spectated. I should have stuck with a mage class, he muttered. Marching away from the snickering fox, he decided to head to the library to do a little research. The training had exhausted him and drained his mana. He hadn't done much besides strain his arms with the heavy swings, but it still had been a burden to the rest of his body. His health had even gone down 15 points during the training. The repetitive swings must have stressed his arms enough that it had somehow caused him to take damage. Walking into the large, exquisite stone building, the air changed. The aroma of ink and fresh books overwhelmed his nose. At the same time, a chill ran down his spine. The same librarian that had woken him up the other night was sitting at the front desk, her glare firmly following Kai as he approached her. Somehow it felt like he was marching to his death. Are you here to defile our halls and take a nap once again? The raven-haired librarian peered at Kai from her seat. Her youthful face looked the opposite of her jaded behavior. Kai would think her pretty if she wasn't on the verge of murdering him for the capital crime of taking a nap. Her glare made him think that nothing he said would rectify his past behavior. Avoiding eye contact, Kai's cheeks turned red. Is it against the rules to nap? He asked sheepishly. The librarian stood faster than Kai could see, slamming her palm on the desk. An audible thump resounded, Kai's chest vibrating ever so slightly. The ancient-looking blue leather tome the librarian had been tending to on the desk jumped up half a meter before crashing back down. The desk stood steady and firm despite the beating it had just taken. Holding up his hands in surrender, I was kidding. I am here to do some research, not sleep. Promise. He tried to give her his most charming smile, but the librarian's face remained indifferent. Her eyes shifted down. What is that? The librarian asked in horror. Pointing at Kai's feet, he instantly knew what she was referring to. Akane sat at his feet, having once again appeared like a ghost. "That is my companion fox, Akane." "Nope, no, absolutely not. No animals in the library, no sleeping, no eating or drinking. That thing will have to stay outside. I will not tolerate it defacing this holy building. I absolutely forbid it." "But, no arguing. Either you both leave, or the fox does." "Akane," Kai turned to her, "I really need to do some research. Can you wait outside? I'll give you extra dessert tonight if you wait quietly." Giving a very human-like roll of the eyes, Akane turned and walked back towards the entrance. After a moment, the librarian spoke up. "You may stay, but I will be watching." Chapter 23. Flirting with Danger. With Akane waiting outside and Kai being granted permission to stay in the library, Kai watched the librarian go back to writing. She didn't even spare him a second glance as she ignored his presence. He stood there awkwardly for a few seconds before he lightly coughed, covering his mouth. Hand frozen, she shot him a harsh glare. "What?" she spit out. Looking uncomfortable, Kai asked, "I was wondering if there were any books on gravity or involving gravity magic." Scowling, she returned to her previous task, tracing over words inside the ancient tome with her pen. The faded words became more prominent once again. Without looking up, she responded, "Second floor, section G, third floor, section E." "Thank you," he said. Walking as quietly as possible, he inched away from the scariest person he had met since his mother. He was a little confused. She had been rude to him, and yet he found himself very attracted to her. He hoped it was just teenage hormones acting up because she was beautiful and not a new inclination. Even with 3 floors to the large library, there wasn't much open space. 4 tables spread out across each floor, with the rest of the space filled with bookcase stacks, all packed with tomes and books of different sizes and colors. Navigating his way to the second floor, Kai found section G easily enough. The only problem was the row of books went on for a dozen meters and was stacked 10 books high on each side. With thousands of options, Kai began his tireless search by checking each title one by one with no other clues to narrow down his search. 20 minutes later, he finally came across a book with gravity in its title. The Science of Gravity, which was written by an author he had never heard of. Grabbing the book, he noticed it was thin and very old. The cover of the book had also been worn down through time and mishandling. Proceeding through the rest of the row, he found nothing else that hinted at having to do with gravity by the title. Giving up on the second floor, he moved to the third. The third floor was an exact copy of the second. Despite searching for almost half an hour, Kai could not find the book on gravity magic, to his frustration. Clearly, it is not a well-known or popular subject of interest or study in the Ashbourne Academy. Kai knew for certain there would be many books and teachers available on Titan Prime regarding gravity magic, giving him another reason to win first place in the tournament and hope this father would deliver his promise of either finding some funds or a sponsor. Lucian and he had already been in the fourth realm over 1,200 years ago. If the man was still alive, Kai couldn't even imagine what kind of power he had attained by now. The prospect seemed daunting, impossible even, but if Kai wanted a chance, he needed access to the best. Sitting down, Kai Lieft began reading through The Science of Gravity. The short book begins by discussing the history and discovery of gravity by Sir Isaac Newton. After some boring biography about Newton, he found out that apparently Robert Hooke had discovered gravity before Newton and had even accused him of plagiarizing his work. It was also noted that 1,000 years before, that astronomer Brahmagupta II had been the first to discover the law of gravity, but it was barely mentioned. The book primarily talked about Newton and his discovery of gravity and his laws. Kai didn't want to be rude, but it was boring material. He wanted to know the secrets of gravity and not some Earth scientists who all claim to discover it. Here we go. Information on gravity. Gravity is a fundamental force of the known universe. It is the force by which an object or energy with mass attracts other objects towards its center. Mass is the quantity of matter in an object. It is what gives everything weight on a planet. I already know this. The gravitational force is dependent on mass and distance. The larger the mass, the stronger the attraction of gravity is. Whereas, the further 2 objects are from each other, the weaker the pull of gravity becomes. Newton's law of universal gravitation states that every particle with mass attracts every other particle with mass in the universe, with a gravitational force proportional to the product of their masses and inversely proportional to the square of the distance between them. The rest of the book discussed formulas and equations used by physicists for calculating the force of gravity, among other things. All the information from the book was knowledge taken from Earth. Kai was certain there was a difference between Earth and Eris. After all, Earth only had one moon orbiting around it, but Eris has dozens of other planets orbiting, each pulling on the other. They were also closer than the moon had been to Earth as well. The Myriad of Worlds was truly mysterious when it came to gravitational forces. Continuing scouring through the books for more information, Kai heard snoring next to him. Startled, he looked to his left and saw Akane, the sneaky little fox, sleeping on the chair next to him. In his shock, he shot up, flinging the chair back until it crashed to the ground, breaking the silence throughout the entire library. Wincing at the sudden loud sound in the quiet library, Kai looked on in horror and fear at the mischievous fox. He thought she understood to wait for him to finish. The only thing he could think of was that he was going to die, and not a monster or beast, but to the beautiful librarian when she found out. "Damn it, Akane, you're going to get me kicked out, banned, or killed. Is that what you want? Your food source dead?" Kai whispered. He closed his eyes in pain at the headache forming due to the stress Akane was giving him at this moment. Kai was panicking. He knew the librarian would ban him if he had committed one more unholy transgression. A clearing of the throat startled him from his thoughts. Turning around, he saw the same librarian had appeared behind him without making any noise. Gods, I really need to get a detection ability. This is getting ridiculous. Kai opened his mouth to speak, but he found himself unable to say anything. He saw the irritated eyes of the librarian. "I can explain," Kai declared. "Explain away. Please tell me why you are making unnecessary noise in my library." Her hands were on her hips, glaring at Kai with a fierceness akin to hatred and loathing. "Noise?" Turning, he looked at the chair next to him, now empty as if it remained so the entire time. "That little—" "Oh, I am sorry, miss. I became excited when I read something in the book. I didn't mean to knock down the chair." Discreetly looking for Akane, he turned around and picked up the chair, setting it upright. There was no fox to be seen. Either she had vanished out of sight or Kai was hallucinating. He wasn't sure what was worse. "See that you remain quiet next time, or I will suspend you from entering until a time when you learn to follow the rules." With one last glare, the librarian turned and began walking to the stairs. The library was once again completely quiet. Gulping, Kai decided it was time to leave. Putting the book back in its place on the second floor, Kai walked to the exit. Akane had not reappeared, but Kai was certain if he wasn't hallucinating, she could take care of herself. Walking through the doors, the sun had begun setting in the distance. He had lost track of time inside the library. The sounds of people talking, clangs from weapons, and everyday life filled his ears as he stepped outside. Starting down the path, he heard a single yap. Shocked, Kai jumped to the side, his hand going towards his non-existent sword handle. Akane sat next to where he just stood, snickering at his reaction. A bunch of different emotions, such as shock, anger, and confusion, passed through Kai all in 1 second as he looked upon the tiny naughty fox. A single idea came to him that could explain everything that had happened. Picking up the fox underneath her front leg pits, her head sat only a few inches away. He looked into her eyes, unable to discern anything. "Can you teleport? Have you been fucking with me this entire time?" The only response he received was a single yap and a head tilted, implying nothing. "And why don't you weigh more? I've seen the way you eat." Another head tilt, this time the other way. Kai dropped his head until his forehead was flush with Akane's forehead. "I waved the flag of surrender, Akane. I need you to chill. You're going to get me in serious trouble. I was trying to be discreet here at the academy," Kai pleaded with the small fox. He knew she understood him. "Please go easy on me." With a roll of her eyes, Akane vanished from Kai's grasp, reappearing on the ground in front of his eyes instantaneously. With a single yap, she turned and began marching down the path to the cafeteria with a little perk in her step. Kai stood in unquestioned shock, staring at the troublemaker walking away. "Are you fucking serious?" "Kai, Ashley," Sven called out, signaling them to approach the combat ring. Sitting on the grass, Kai reached out and grabbed the wooden sword to his right. The feel of the wood and grain had become a familiar thing over the last few weeks. No longer were the students allowed to bring their own weapons to his melee training class. Only wooden weapons provided by the academy would be permitted in combat between students unless they were participating in an official duel or the end-of-the-year tournament. The crunch of grass turned into soft thumps as his boots met the dirt of the combat ring. Kai felt tense. His entire body was stiff with anticipation and dread. Over the last couple of weeks, Sven had begun teaching Kai a new form. It was basically a new set of moves commonly taught to sword-wielding trainees in the Ashbourne Kingdom. It was called Flow Like Ash and was basically a mobile style of sword fighting that relied on graceful footwork. Kai wasn't so sure about it being useful for the kind of fighting he would be doing under his gravity magic, but it was the kata taught to all students at the academy initially. The time had come to begin sparring with other students. Kai's first match would be against the highest-leveled student, Ashley. He knew there was no way he would win this spar. The stats and level differences were too far apart to make this anything but a slaughter. And even if magic was allowed, Kai was confident he would still get his ass kicked. The difference in realms was very significant in fights. She stood relaxed, leaning against the wooden spear which was embedded in the ground as she stared at Kai's approach. She had a smirk on her face. "Go easy on me," Ashley said, giving him a wink. Her light and easy smile showed she was enjoying his current dilemma. "I think that's my line," Kai frowned. He didn't know how to approach her. Not only was she faster and stronger, but she also outranged him. The skill she showed with her spear during class was also nothing to scoff at. She was likely better than Kai's skill with a sword. For such an easygoing, teasing girl, she put a lot of effort into activities during class. Enigma was the word Kai would use to describe her. She was always trying to be friendly with him, more so than any other student. Kai was under no illusion that he was someone special at the moment. Sure, he worked out often and was decent-looking, but that didn't explain her odd behavior towards him. If only the librarian was as interested in me as Ashley is. He had a guess she wanted something from him, but he couldn't even fathom what. She never asked him for anything, only kept trying to get closer. Maybe I should pretend to give in and see what she wants. Nah, not a good idea. I suck at subterfuge. How about we make a bet? She put her finger to her chin, looking thoughtful. If I win, how about... You take me on a date? She asked. Well, I'd say that solves the question of what she wants, he thought sarcastically. Kai could feel killing intent radiating from the sidelines where the other students watched. Looking to the side, he could see a frown on Nicholas's face. The other members of Group S looked livid. Why? Why are you playing these games, Ashley? What do you want? Who's to say I want anything? Perhaps I just want to spend time with you. You're definitely my type. She smiled sweetly, throwing a wink at Kai. No. Fine, I was going to let you win, but now I think I'll punish you a little. She burst toward Kai without warning. Before Kai could properly react, the blunt wooden spearhead had impacted his stomach, sending him flying back onto the grass. Instinctively, he grabbed his stomach as his lunch threatened to come up. If he hadn't jumped back ever so slightly and softened the blow last second, he would be in even more pain. He saw Ashley standing in the same spot from where she had begun the fight. Not a single strand of hair was out of place, making her appear as if she hadn't moved once. Do you know why Instructor Sven put you and me in the first fight together? Ashley said, even though it would be better off for each of us to fight someone closer to our level. I can assure you, it was not for my benefit. Grabbing the wooden sword off the ground, Kai shuffled closer to his starting position. I don't care. Let's just fight. A flash of wood came too quickly once again. Instead of a straight shot, it swung from the side, slamming into Kai's wrist, forcing him to drop his sword. Sweat clung to his brow as he held his wrist. The pain radiated, throbbing with every beat of his heart. Reaching down, he grabbed the sword with his left hand. He had learned to fight with his left, but wasn't as proficient as his primary hand. Fake gasping, "Are you a masochist?" Ashley's face mirrored one of shock watching Kai grab the sword. Do you like me punishing you? She teased coyly. Enough. Next, Nicholas and Jonathan, Sven yelled out, stopping the one-sided massacre. Kai to me. Blowing him an air kiss, Ashley sauntered off to the other students. There was apprehension as she approached, every student taking a step back unconsciously. Kai limped to the impassive-faced instructor Sven. She wasn't lying. As harsh as that was, it was for your benefit. As passable as your sword skills are, it will not be enough to bridge the divide between you and the other students. You need to master your magic before the end-of-year tournament. Even your brother didn't face such challenges during his time in the academy. Without even counting the two abnormalities of Nicholas and Ashley, there are many other students that could win first place this year at the tournament. Oh, and try to get into the forging stage before the tournament, or you won't have any hope of winning. Sven sagely lectured. Chapter 24. Preparations. Kai, over here, Andre called from the side of the assembly of students. Joining his roommates, they formed a small group on the outside of the gathering. Nearly all of the first-year students had arrived onto the training field. Today they were to receive their instructions and group placement for their practical field excursion. Scanning the area, he found Hector standing near a group of students that couldn't ever be mistaken for anything else other than nobles. The clothing they wore seemed flashy and all too rich. Hector seemed to hover around the outside of the group, included in the sense that he was to hang back and wait on his master, who Kai assumed was the blonde hair and blue-eyed noble. Hector's eyes hardly left the man. Kai gave his roommate a small wave when his eyes found his. The only response was the slightest down tilt of his head before he turned his focus back to his lord. All of a sudden, Kai felt a hard shove on his side. Turning to look at the offender, Andre had his elbow out at his side, but his attention was not on Kai, but something to their left. Turning that way, Kai found what Andre had been looking at. Sven was here, but something was obviously wrong. His fists were curled up, causing his already muscular arms to bulge exaggeratedly. Spittle flew out of his mouth as he yelled at his companion, who appeared completely nonplussed about having the livid melee training instructor yelling at her. Who he appeared to be yelling, Kai could hear nothing from the two, despite them being only 50 feet away. Kai wasn't able to make out any details about his companion. Their figure identified them as female, but they wore a hood and had their body mostly turned away from the students. More and more students had begun taking notice as the arguing continued for a few more minutes. It happened quickly. One moment Sven was yelling, then next he was taking a step back. His face had changed from the flushed red of anger to fear. She took a step forward and passed him a piece of paper. Saying something unknown, she vanished the next second before their very eyes. Sven seemed to snap out of his haze 10 seconds later. Blinking, he turned to the students, only finally noticing he had an audience. Grumbling something Kai was able to make out as fuck, the man turned and stomped to where the rest of the instructors stood waiting. In front of the other instructors, he turned his back on them and faced the students. "Attention, students," he said in a normal voice. Some conversations stopped, while others kept going, whispering between them. "I said, attention!" Sven bellowed loud enough that Kai and many others had to cover their ears, despite the lack of magic used. Every student was silent now. "Welcome to prep for field training, aka your first expedition. For those of you who don't know me, I am Sven, instructor of melee combat. Starting next week, we will go out once a month, on a field excursion to an undisclosed location. You will be fighting monsters in areas scouted beforehand. This will be an opportunity to level up and train your skills and abilities in actual combat." He stopped and took a deep breath. His body tensed again, causing his muscles and veins to swell. "Students," he said somberly, "I was just informed by our headmistress that this year our expedition will change compared to previous years." He flattened the piece of paper that had been half crushed in his fist and brought it up to read. "To challenge and assist students in growing, we will be partially removing the safety net cast on them during their field excursions. At random, one group, every excursion will be selected to be without their instructor's protection. You will not know until the time when you need their help comes. It is up to your group to plan and deal with all threats." The piece of paper ignited in Sven's hand, where it quickly turned into ash. His downcast expression spoke volumes of what he thought of the situation. Silence permeated the students until someone finally called out, "Can we abstain from going on these trips?" "You can," Sven said. Then he added, "If you don't go, however, you will be kicked out of the academy." Kai felt for the melee instructor. The man obviously cared for his students enough to not want to see them dead. Why would things change now of all times? Is it because of the war with the Empire? Another student of wealth from Hector's group raised their hand. How long will the field training expedition last each time? Each excursion will last up to 10 hours. 1 to 2 hours to arrive and assemble at the predetermined location, with another 6 hours for exploring the area and fighting the monsters you come across. And another few hours for returning. We will take carriages to each location. Sven spoke slowly and clearly, making sure each student understood. Does anyone have more questions? No? He said without giving anyone a chance to ask another. As per tradition, we have placed you in groups of 10, with a total of 12 groups this year. Kai shifted a bit. 10 people? That's a large group. We'll make for slow leveling too. They must not have that many instructors to supervise. You will not be able to pick your teammates. We have already done so for you, and there will be no changing our decision. Through the information given at admissions and the observations of my fellow instructors and myself in your melee, range, and mage classes, we have tried to create well-rounded groups. The levels and classes vary in each group and do not reflect your mage, range, or melee training class placements. I understand you may not want to fight with others, and I can accept that. However, this class is an opportunity for you not only to level up, but learn to fight in groups. Now beginning with Group 1, assemble over there when I begin calling your names. Sven's voice commanded authority. The decision had been made and he would expect everyone's compliance. Everyone began being assigned to an instructor. Andre and Sean were immediately separated from Kai. As fate would have it, Kai was paired with Hector and Jason Grell in Group 2. The worst part was that both of Jason's minions were also in the group. Kai spied Jason looking unsurprised at the news, as if such news was expected. I will not tolerate any mishaps or fooling around. Make no mistake, despite the instructors babysitting you, assume your life will be at risk at all times. Do not do anything to harm your fellow students, or I will be forced to report you to the academy headmistress. Sven's voice had a tone of unquestionable resolve to it. He would not tolerate any nonsense from stupid students. A train of carriages rolled out of the Ashbourne capital to a location unknown to most of the passengers. The time had finally come for the first field training expedition of the school year for the first-year students. The energy in the air could not be contained. Kai himself felt restless, despite him trying to close his eyes and meditate for the last hour. The lively conversation between his 3 roommates made it difficult to concentrate, however. This whole endeavor is foolish. Trying to make us cooperate with other students is simply asking for trouble. No one in their right mind is going to want to share their kills and experience with people they don't know or trust, Andre angrily said. It's not only that. I don't see how I can put my faith and trust in a stranger to watch and protect my back. If the gods forbid, we are the group chosen to be without the instructor's protection, Hector pointed out. I heard starting in our second year, we can pick our own team, but will lack supervision, Sean said unexpectedly. Sean was the quietest of the 4, often only speaking when spoken to. Every time his voice remained just above a whisper, as if talking louder was a burden. Doesn't help us now. They all split us up except Hector and Kai, Andre pointed out. How long did they say the trip would take? Hector asked. About 2 hours. We still have an hour left to go, Andre pointed out. Kai, what do you think? Hector asked. Think about what? Kai asked, waking up from his mediation nap. His hair, usually messy hair, was flat on one side from leaning against the inside of the carriage wall. About being put in random teams and this whole nonsense about not being protected. Kai stretched his arms, yawning. I think it's exactly what you were saying before. Foolish and stupid. Many of these students are green, fresh to slaying monsters. They can read or hear about it all they want, but when it comes down to the moment, most of them will shit their pants. To put them at risk at this stage, before they have had time to grow, seems intentionally senseless. But, Kai paused, I also understand their side too. Without knowing if you have that safety net behind you, you're going to fight harder, smarter even. That sense of danger lurking behind the fight, wondering if you are going to become Monster Chow, it will help you grow faster, not just in levels, but as a fighter. In the beginning days of the humans' ascension to the Myriad of Worlds, they had no one guarding them. Closing his eyes, Kai thought back to the last week. My group already is at odds. Jason had created a rift of sorts in the group. He wants to be leader, or king, but everyone had enough sense to know he wants to hog all the monsters with his 2 friends. The others want to form a unified team of 10. Kai barked out a laugh. Trying to create makeshift teams that will be competing for kills between members seems like a good way for someone to get hurt or worse. I have no intention of sharing anything with Jason and his goons. Besides, the end-of-year tournament isn't a team fight, it's a single elimination format. Everyone went silent at Kai's answer. That's quite cynical, Kai, Andre finally said. Shrugging, that's just the way it is. When it comes down to it, every person will be out for themselves, especially the nobility, Kai murmured. What do you mean? Sean asked, leaning in. I think he means that the nobility desire to stay in power, and the idea that a commoner or someone from a lowly birth can rise in power and threaten them is what he is referring to. It's been this way since the beginning of this kingdom because they have resources, training, and information, all things making it easier for them to ascend. However, the nobles have expectations to protect this kingdom, so they are expected and required to train and grow in strength in order to do so, Hector supplied. Kai reached his hand out and tried to pet his Akane, only for his hand to pass through the air. Crap, I forgot. Akane wasn't allowed to come. Akane's illustrious fur had become a calming technique for Kai in the past month. Today had been extra stressful with the anticipation of the coming battles. Although Kai was used to fighting for his life, it had been so long since he had done so in the wilds without supervision he trusted. Not since that battle with the first boar he slain. His nerves and anticipation were getting to him. Only the crazy ones don't get nervous in combat, he reminded himself. Everyone was dressed in their battle equipment. They had the option of bringing their armor to the staging area and equipping it there, but most of the students decided to wear their armor before they left the academy. Kai imagined everyone else was also nervous. Hector sat dressed in a dark grey and red robe with a crest of a cross sat center on his chest of the noble family he served. The robe didn't look like it would be able to do much in the way of defense, but it was probably better than Kai's own armor. He only had a cheap hard leather chest piece and the pair of white Aerowolf boots he received from Ashley. Andre was sitting in scale mail that he was obviously uncomfortable in. His helmet bounced up and down on his lap as his leg shook lightly. Sean was like Kai. He wore simple hard leather armor on his chest, but that was where the differences stopped. He actually had a complete set of leather armor, unlike Kai. I need to go shopping before the next field trip and buy some additional armor. He had asked Andre to help him find some good armor for a decent price, but his roommate only had time after their first expedition. Thus, Kai acknowledged he would have to be careful during this trip, as his leather armor was probably closer to unenchanted cloth than actual protection. Kai watched the scenery pass for the next hour after giving up on meditating. Everyone out, we have arrived. Kai and the group shuffled out of the carriage. All the students were standing by their own carriages, waiting for instructions. Gone were the paved roads. Nothing but a worn dirt path remained. Massive, thick trees lay ahead, numerous and thick enough to block vision deeper into the woods after a little distance. Welcome, students, to the Delmash Forest. A female instructor Kai hadn't met called out with a squeaky voice, figuring she must be from one of the mage class's instructors because of her distinct wizard-like robes. In a moment, we will ask you to separate into your pre-assigned groups. Together with your instructor, you all will spend the next 6 hours in the Delmash Forest, hunting monsters. Group 2, this way please, a beefy instructor from the melee combat class called out, followed by more instructors calling for their group members. Hector and Kai walked over, joining the glaring Jason. The glare quickly turned into a self-satisfied smirk, no doubt at Kai's obvious poverty. Responding in kind, Kai gave Jason a one-over as well. His armor looked pristine, unused even. He wore steel plate armor contoured to his body. It looked light enough to allow for mobility and speed, yet sturdy enough to hold up to attacks. Kai was sure it was enchanted with at least the basics of durability that most enchanted armors possessed, except his now that he thought about it. He guessed such enchantments probably cost more than the leather he wore. A white cloak flowed behind Jason. Wow, that dud is even wearing a cloak. Now that we are all here, let's set out. Without any further words or introductions, the beefy man turned and began walking away and into the forest. Jason gave Kai one last look before turning away and following. Kai checked his belt and made sure his basic health potions were firmly attached. After confirming, he took a breath and walked into the forest. Name: Kaismo Cineris. Realm Task Level Foundation 28. Aspect: Gravity. Class: Vanguard. Race: Human. Health: 520. Stamina: 250. Mana: 250. Vitality: 52. Strength: 50. Dexterity: 20. Endurance: 25. Intelligence: 30. Wisdom: 25. Unspent attributes available: 0. Active skills: Heavy Blow, 10. Gravity Crush, 10. Domain, 10. Passive skills: Burden, 10. General skills: Identify. Pain Tolerance: 1. Sense Improvement, 1. Soul Presence. 4. Elemental Magic Resistance. 4. Physical Resistance. 4. Chapter 25. The First Encounter. I'm surprised there is such a thriving forest so close to the Ashbourne Mountains. Kai trekked across the fallen leaves and grass with the group, heading deeper into the unknown forest. There is no reason why this forest wouldn't be thriving, Hector answered, even though it's so cloudy near the mountains. I doubt this forest sees much sunlight. Shouldn't you know this already? The environment has adapted with magic to live and thrive under conditions with limited sun. The tree themselves are a special variant that doesn't require much water or light. They are actually one of the main exports besides ashstone. Shouldn't we discuss what everyone's class and magic element are so we can work on a strategy? Asked a short, freckled girl, looking around for confirmation. Her friend walking next to her also nodded. Why? What can you even do? You're only level 14, Jason sneered. You'll be more a liability than helpful out there. Just stay in the back and out of my way. What a classic arsehole in the making. He's not entirely wrong, though. Call him callous, but he had no inclination of sharing experience with other students except perhaps Hector. With Jason setting the tone of how the groups would work, people began splitting into smaller groups. The freckled girl joining 2 others near her level. Jason and his 2 goons were obviously a party. Seeing as how both Kai and Hector had not yet picked a group, the friend of the freckled girl approached them. Would you guys like to join our group? He asked. Human, Foundation Level 21. Sorry, not interested right now. Kai turned him down. Undeterred, the student's gaze turned to Hector. Same. Looking a little crestfallen, the student turned away before shaking his head no. The others, seeing it, looked a little dejected too. Hector stood at his side, seemingly unbothered. He was at the highest level of all the students present. Right now, the others were a liability to Kai. Without knowing what they would be facing in the forest, he didn't want to commit to anything with the less experienced students. Since this was their first trip, he didn't think there would be anything too outrageous that required a 10-person team to survive. Most of the students were somewhat new to fighting monsters and using magic. He hoped the instructors planned accordingly. Hector, how about we team up together until we see what we are working with? Kai whispered to Hector. Sounds good. You will be the front lines and I'll shoot them from the back. Won't take much to coordinate, Hector replied. Kai nodded. You're a fire mage, right? Yep. Just try not to set me on fire. It doesn't feel good, Kai said, recalling the day he died. Although fire magic had been only one of his worries, he did end up getting burned during the fight. Fire magic was actually the first magic to ambush him in his house when he was with his parents. Hector seemed concerned at his last statement, but dismissed it, seeing Kai lost in thought. Everyone, take caution. The monsters in this area range between the Foundation realm and the Adept realm. The stronger monsters live deeper in the forest, closer to the mountainside, but that isn't always the case. They do tend to wander, the instructor informed everyone. Kai crept behind the instructor, his hand resting on his sword's handle, an action that didn't go unnoticed by the man in front of him. Kai had no qualms about using the instructor as a shield until he figured out what he was fighting. The man could take care of himself after all. Feeling uneasy about not having a perception or detection power, Kai strained his ears and eyes to find monsters. So far they had seen nothing during the past 5-minute walk, but there was plenty of ambient noise around them. But with all the trees, the sound was bouncing all around, making it impossible to determine the locations. Everyone except Hector already had their weapons out. To immediate Kai's right, Hector appeared unbothered. His eyes swept back and forth through the forest, but walked relaxed with his hand grabbing his wrist behind his back in a very sagely pose. Surprisingly, Jason looked on edge. His ornate sword was out in his hand. He kept flinching every time there was a sound. Somewhere in the distance, battle had already begun, small explosions and sounds of fighting echoing through the trees. "Sir, what kind of monsters are we going to fight?" one of the students asked. "You will see soon enough. We are approaching a few now." Within seconds, 2 beings came into sight. Great Deer, Foundation level 90. Great Deer, Foundation level 86. The deer looked docile enough, grazing on grass as the group approached the clearing. Their large bodies were covered with reddish-brown fur. Despite the deer standing on all 4 legs, their backs were taller than Kai's head. Kai noticed the instructor had stopped walking while Jason's group continued forward. A moment of consideration flashed between some of the members before Jason held his hand out. 2 blades of air ripped through the calm atmosphere, traveling quickly until one impacted one closest deer's side, the other going wide. Blood gathered at the wound of the shallow cut. With a bleat of pain and fear, both deer took off into the thickets, vanishing from sight immediately. Everyone stared after the vanishing deer in silence. Only the laughing of the instructor could be heard. What the hell was that? Kai couldn't help but ask. Jason had scared away the beasts before they could even get in position. "What?" Jason gave everyone a seething look. "I'm not going to wait for you lot to fuck it up." "No, you did that yourself, dumbass," Kai unconsciously retorted. There were a few gasps that could be heard among the students. Feeling the usual glare trained on him, Kai shifted to face Jason so he could look right back at him. "Would you stop glaring at me all the damn time? It's getting annoying. I'm going to start getting the wrong ideas if you keep staring at me like that." He was fed up with Jason and his arrogant, spoiled nature. The guy already hated him. All he had to do was survive 1 year at the academy and win the tournament, and he would never have to see the pompous asshole ever again. True to his nature, Jason gave Kai a death glare of all death glares. The man was nothing but unoriginal. Thinking on it a little more, he had probably made a mortal enemy when he accepted the boots. Not the smartest thing to do, but it was too late to take back his impulsive actions and comments. "If you children are done playing around, we have more monsters 40 meters out to your left," the instructor informed. He could hear the sound of a strange barking amongst the trees, the foliage masking the origin of the sound. It was infrequent enough that it took a few seconds to locate the source. Hiding among the leaves was a green lizard no bigger than his forearm. Every time the lizard opened its mouth, a sound akin to a dog would bark out. As if answering the call, multiple barks responded all around Kai, all hidden away. Tiny bright red eyes flickered onto the unwelcome intruders, another bark echoing out in the unknown of the forest, many barks echoing its call. Barking lizard, Foundation level 41. Kai was beginning to feel strange. He was beginning to have mild ringing in his ears. Hector and some of the others had even covered their ears. Every bark seemed to be infused with magic, attacking anyone in the vicinity to hear it. The barking began harmonizing. One by one, the lizards would bark at the same moment, their magical barks turning louder. With every bark, pulse of sound reverberated outwards, hitting those nearby. Kai's ears were beginning to ring softly. More and more lizards started joining the chorus, all harmonizing their magic in waves. Bark! 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 Kai, go now, pleaded Hector, his voice muffled through the ringing in Kai's ears. The noticeable sound of pain was evident in his voice. His eyes were closed as he grimaced in distress, with his hands on his ears as he tried to block out the sound magic. Kai sprinted to the tree where the lizard he had identified had attached itself. Seeing the incoming predator, it tried crawling away up the tree, only for Kai's blade to flash down, slicing through its back leg. The shocked lizard fell to the ground, thrashing and rolling around. Kai tugged at the handle, but his sword had managed to become stuck firmly in the tree. A small flash of orange light flared over the lizard, causing it to bark in agony for a second before it ceased its sound. Your group has slain Barking Lizard, Foundation Level 41. Vanguard has reached Foundation Level 29, 1 level. With the lizard dead, Kai placed his foot against the tree and pushed against it while pulling at his sword. The sword slowly inched out until it popped free. "You good?" questioned Hector, having watched Kai struggle to pull his sword out of the tree. His hands were already back on his ears, covering them. He still looked in pain, just less so than before. "Yay, let's get more before they are all gone." Already several groups were fanning out, searching for the source of the noise. The lower-leveled students seemed to be in the most distress. It was also funny seeing students try to fight the lizards. They would have their ears covered until the moment they attacked, then immediately go back to covering them. All kinds of magic and yells flared up around the area. After a few minutes, the barking ceased entirely. Kai had slain 3 by himself, and an additional 2 with Hector's help. The more barking lizards that died, the lessen the effects their magic had on the people around, making it easier to fight as time went on for the others. The creatures' defenses were pitiful. A single sword swipe without magic was enough to slay them. Vanguard has reached Foundation Level 32. Checking his health and mana, Kai noticed both were doing well. His health hadn't dropped much, only a few points. His mana was a little lower after using Heavy Blow a few times. The fight hadn't lasted too long, making him unable to use his abilities much. There was also the fact he couldn't use his domain with so many others present. He did try a gravity pillar on one of the lizards, but it didn't really seem to do much, probably because the lizard was so small and light. Grabbing a large leaf, Kai tried to clean his sword of lizard blood. It wasn't doing much good, besides spreading the blood further down the blade. Feeling a hand on his shoulder, Kai turned around, seeing it was Hector. Fresh crimson blood was dripping down from his ears. "You're bleeding from your ears." Kai pointed out the obvious. Hector put his hand on his ear. Taking it away, he saw fresh blood. Pulling a thin vial of red liquid from his pocket, he knocked it back, blinking a few times. "Are you good?" "You were closer to those lizards than I was." Confused, Kai checked his ears, but there was no blood coming from them. He looked around his body and saw nothing out of the ordinary. "I'm good. I only lost a few health points." "How is that possible? You were closer to them, and I'm almost 50 levels above you," he observed Kai with curiosity. "Maybe you should invest more into vitality," Kai half joked. It was very unlikely that his vitality was higher than Hector's. So why was I less affected by the sound magic than he? I can't exactly ask him about his stats or abilities. One of the rudest things you could do was ask someone about their personal stats and abilities. It was tantamount to a massive offense, asking someone for their most personal secrets. Such things could only be shared with your most trusted friends or family. He didn't have any defensive abilities yet, so that ruled out that option. The only possibility was under his general skills. His physical and magical resistance was at 4, meaning he would receive a passive increase of 40% to his natural defenses and abilities once he receives a defensive ability. His Blood Champion class had not given any additional resistance, unlike his Vanguard class. It was a bit new to him, being a little more robust, although he lacked the healing blood magic had given him. Around Kai, multiple people had blood coming from their ears as well. Most of the others looked worse off than Hector, their shoulders stained from the blood as it fell onto their clothing and armor. The girl with freckles, who had spoken up earlier, was on the ground, unconscious. One of her teammates was pouring a vial into her mouth. Jason looked unruffled. No blood or injuries could be seen, though one of his eyes was squinting, so maybe he wasn't as unaffected as he looked. Huffing, he walked to the instructor, ignoring the unconscious girl on the floor, not even sparing her a glance. With the 4 gained levels, Kai now had 20 unspent stat attributes. What to do? What to do? His dexterity was his lowest stat, which could possibly be a problem if he encountered agile or fast enemies. There was no guarantee he could slow or stop the enemy with his gravity magic alone. Right now, it didn't seem strong enough to do so for most monsters. As it stands, all attributes are useful for me for now. So, no min-maxing like my past life's mother taught me. What I need to do is figure out which stats are the most important for my class and build. I am a warrior, but I also have mage-like abilities. He sighed. Mom, I wish you were still alive to help me figure this crap out. I guess I can do an even spread until I figure out more, but I have a feeling vitality and strength will be critical for me in the future. Fighting under increased gravity will make me weigh more, making it more difficult to move. I'll need a body made of steel to succeed under such hellish conditions and fight. But I can't neglect my intelligence, or my gravity won't do enough to hinder whoever I am fighting. Allocating his stats, Kai felt satisfied for now. He ended up putting 10 into Dexterity, bringing his lowest attribute to 30, and put 5 each into Endurance and Wisdom. For a split second, he felt magic flow through him before it vanished as if it hadn't existed. Students, let's proceed to the next area. Only 5 hours are left, the instructor called out, beckoning the students over. Everyone was on their feet within moments, even the formerly unconscious freckled girl. Although she was a little wobbly, requiring assistance to stand and walk. One of her teammates turned out to be a healer and was giving her extra attention. Panting lightly, sweat dripped from the brow of the healer. He looked exhausted already. Kai knew healing took a massive amount of mana, making it so the low-leveled guy was probably out of mana already, even after healing minor injuries. 4 levels, not bad, Hector commented to Kai. Kai noticed that Hector had not gained any levels, not that he expected him to. The monsters were at a much lower level than him and hardly proved a challenge to kill. Let's get going before the others get there first. Chapter 26. Troubling Fight. The 10 students split apart back into their smaller groups as they traversed the forest. It seemed the deeper they went, the denser the foliage and trees were. Identify showed the trees varied in type, but were nothing unusual from a normal everyday tree. The forest appeared normal as far as forests go. Thick canopies blocked most of the light from passing down to the forest floor, making for an ominous adventure. The instructor stayed back, telling the students their next target was nearby. The only warning they had received was, use extreme caution. The grumpy, beefy man was definitely a hands-off instructor, not coddling his students. Kai wasn't sure if he would truly let students die. It wasn't a risk he was willing to take, so he would proceed with caution as he was still coming into his new class and magic. Kai towed carefully across the ground, attempting to avoid making as much noise as possible. His fellow students were less inclined to be stealthy, snapping sticks and stepping on fallen crunchy leaves on their trek through the forest. They had entered a tiny clearing, trees and bushes encircled the area. Hector stayed 10 feet behind Kai, following him step for step. Kai could feel it, the tense, agonizing moment before a fight. He glanced at every shadow expecting something to pop out, but nothing did. The sounds of battle in the far distance had quieted down over time as the groups moved further apart. There was an eerie quiet now, not even small animals were making noise any longer. It was the sound of death, a stillness of life. A deathly silence only possible when all the nearby creatures and animals were afraid or dead. On the ground, unmoving, lay a familiar-looking animal, a great deer. Its lifeless black eyes stared into the void. The body had been torn to shreds, looking like it had been mutilated for fun. "There!" called out one of the students, pointing to the trees. Following the finger's path, Kai could see a large black cat shrouded in shadows, only parts of its body visible, and its bright golden-yellow eyes. It stood on all fours, atop a thick tree branch. Its posture could only result in one thing, an ambush. Grove Panther, forging level 35. Shit, this thing is 100 levels over me, and in the second realm. We are fucked. In one instant, the Panther was on the branch. The next, he was on the ground running towards the students. Panic ensued as some students started shooting magic at the beast, while a few others began running away. The Panther tanked the weak magic, barreling right through the spells without so much as flinching. Despite being the farthest away from the Panther, Kai cast Gravity Pillar without a second thought, creating an invisible pressure along the Panther's path to the other students. Undeterred by the unknown, the Panther sped right into the pillar of gravity. Holding his breath, Kai watched as the Panther ran into the small pillar of gravity and out of it as if it hadn't existed. As if in response to his failure in stopping the beast, a scream rang out from a student. The Panther stood on top of that same fallen student, its long claws dug into their chest, making strips of their flesh through the robes. Blood began spilling out of his mouth. With every scream and breath taken, more blood would fly out. It wasn't until a small fireball launched across the small clearing that the Panther deftly dodged, moving away as it ran off into the thick foliage. "It's too fast," yelled one of the students. They were too outmatched and uncoordinated. Even if they worked together, it would be a difficult task, and Kai had no hope of rallying the panicked students to fight. The male student lay unmoving on the ground, blood leaked from his mouth and chest, his silence speaking loudly to the state of his condition. Only the shallow rise of his chest gave thought that he was still alive, though barely. "Zachary!" screamed the freckled girl. She pressed her hands against the injured man's chest wounds, trying to stifle the bleeding. "Fred, heal him," she pleaded with the robed healer. The other robed male student in the small group stood frozen with wide eyes of panic. His jaw chattered with terror as he stared into the distance, focusing on nothing in particular. "Freddie!" Coming to his senses, Freddie blinked a few times before turning his head to the freckled girl. With wet eyes, she said, "Freddie, please heal him. He's lost a lot of blood. He's not breathing anymore." Kneeling next to the still young man, the healer Freddie placed his hand gently against the man's chest. A bright white light glowed from his palm. Sweat immediately began to pool on Fred's face, his eyes solely on his patient as he concentrated on healing the man. Distracted with the healing, another scream rang out. A student was being dragged into the thicket, the Panther's mouth grabbing onto their leg as it pulled him quickly out of sight. "No, no, stop, help," were the only sounds they came from the taken man before eerie silence took over once again. The instructor remained in the same spot, his arms crossed over his chest. Not a speck of emotion could be seen. Despite the previous screams, his facial expression had not flinched or changed once. What the hell is going on? This isn't right. Inhaling and exhaling, Kai yanked his sword out. The beast had already incapacitated 2 people. Squinting, he looked all over, but there was no sign of the Panther. It had vanished into thin air beyond the bush. There was no control or order in the group. Everyone was doing their own thing. There was complete and utter panic. Hector's face was scrunched up in nervousness. Only Kai appeared calm, but he had also been the farthest from where the Panther had been. "Help us!" screamed the freckled girl, tears of fear falling down her face. "My father will hear about this," roared Jason, spinning around in circles to find the evasive beast. "You think your father will want a weakling of an heir to inherit his legacy? To lead his house?" The instructor laughed heartily, finding the prospect amusing. "Are you willing to risk my father's wrath if I die?" The Panther stalked out of the bushes, fresh blood splattered around his mouth. Its tongue came out, licking around the edges of the mouth, savoring the taste. The group looked on in terror at the approaching monster. "Your father came to this academy once. He understands the risks you must take to succeed. Kill it or die." "Fuck, air slash," yelled Jason. Kai couldn't believe the idiot was yelling his abilities aloud, telegraphing them for his opponents to see and hear. Even if the beast didn't understand what he said, yelling it would only attract attention to himself. 2 small crescent spectral blades of air appeared. The Panther merely crouched low, allowing the air blades to pass overhead. Its eyes were trained on Jason now. With one last look, it dashed into the thickets again, vanishing from sight. "Does anyone have anything to stop or slow it down?" Hector called out. Kai heard a rustle in the bushes behind him. Swiveling his head, he saw the Panther had launched a sneak attack at the exposed mage's back. "Hector, watch out!" Pushing Hector to the side, Kai took the position in front of him, sword at the ready. Standing his ground, Kai was ready to play the game of chicken with the Shadow Panther. It didn't back down as it dashed swiftly towards him, its four powerful muscular legs working in tandem to push it forward faster than Kai thought possible for a creature of its level. Domain. Kai felt his body and sword increase in weight. The panther seemed unbothered as it entered his domain, only barely slowing down. "Air slash!" yelled the dreaded familiar voice. A whistle pierced through the air behind Kai until a stinging feeling washed over his arm. The blade of air passed right underneath his arm, nicking it on its way past. The attack landed on the panther's shoulders, flinching the beast temporarily. Grunting in pain, Kai leaped towards the panther, sword high in the air. Bringing it down, he used heavy blow, feeling the weight of his sword increase even further than under the domain spell. Doubling in speed, the blade flashed down, striking the ground as he missed his speedy target. Evading the blade, the panther dashed past Hector and Kai towards Jason's group. Kai quickly turned domain off as it ran out of range. One of Jason's goons let out a high-pitched yell, swinging his battle axe down in one epic blow, only to miss. Dust and debris scattered about, obscuring vision. The healer was still kneeling over the fallen man. "We need to pin it," Kai called out, keeping his eyes on a swivel as he searched for the missing panther once again. "I can do it," called out someone decked out in typical mage robes. She held a very ornate staff in her hand. "Then why haven't you done it already?" Kai seethed a little internally. The difference in the panther's body strength and Kai's gravity magic was too great to be of any real use here. He needed the other students to step up. But between the panic and lack of coordination, the fight was a lot more difficult than it had to be. "Good, then it's up to you," Kai said, prompting the student. He hadn't planned on trying to lead the others, but at this rate they would all die unless the instructor intervened. He had screwed up. He hadn't expected the instructor to have them fight something a whole realm above the group, or else he would have prepared more. Feeling a disturbance behind him, Kai swiveled his body. Alarmed, the panther was already in mid-jump, soaring right at him. The panther crashed into him, its full weight bringing his body down onto the forest floor and causing his sword to fly from his grip. Kai pushed at its face as he tried to keep it from biting his own off. Its front claws shredded into his leather chest piece, tearing the cheap material apart as it pushed at his chest, making it difficult to breathe. Sharp point pierced his legs, the panther's back claws doing their work of tearing his flesh off through his unarmored pant trousers. "Do something!" Kai yelled at the top of his lungs. Vines filled with thorns sprouted from the ground and began wrapping around the panther. Snarling, the panther tried to push off Kai, but the vines wrapping around them prevented it from moving away from its spot over Kai's body. Effective pinned over his body, Kai let go of its face with his right hand and began wailing into the distracted panther's side with his fist. He felt the vines tightening as they pressed the panther further against Kai's body. The claws kept digging in deeper as the beast tried to push away and off of Kai. The pain was becoming more intense with every passing second. "I meant to trap the beast, but not on top of me." More attacks began focusing on the immobile panther, fire and air dominating the area. Kai's body flushed with heat, small fire blasts burning into the side of the beast. The magic began taking effect. The panther seemed hurt, as small cuts and minor burns coated its short black fur, but not enough to make it panic. With a hiss of annoyance, the panther's attention was taken off Kai, despite them still being connected. Searching to his left and right, Kai saw his sword just out of reach. "Shit, either the panther or my group is going to kill me if this keeps up." He had felt someone's magic hit him, but he had hardly noticed with everything else going on. The panther's claws had shredded through Kai's leather chest piece. Now the tips of its claws had begun piercing into Kai's chest, just like it had done to the student before. With a yell of primal fury, he began punching the panther's side once again. This time his attacks were enhanced by the power and weight of his gravity ability, Heavy Blow. The first punch caused an immediate reaction as the panther howled in pain. Without stopping, Kai kept punching and yelling, triggering the panther to continue clawing his body in retaliation. Latching onto his shoulder with its fangs, Kai screamed in pain as his vision began to darken, his health declining rapidly. Chapter 27. News of misfortune. Kai's vision darkened. He was aware he had lost a lot of blood. Because he was no longer a blood mage, he couldn't block the vein leaking his life away or heal. With no other choice, he punched, pulled back, and punched again with the gravitational assistance of heavy blow. He punched his fist into the Panther harder and faster than ever. Again and again, his fist drove into its side. Even when he felt his knuckles break, he didn't stop. Yowling in pain, the beast tried to escape off his body, thrashing about, but the vines kept it trapped over him. On his next punch, he felt the bones shatter underneath his fist, sending shards deep inside the beast. With a final yowl, the Panther swayed for a moment before collapsing on him. Your group has slain, Grove Panther, forging level 35. Vanguard has reached foundation level 33 while Vanguard has reached foundation level 40. Heavy Blow has advanced to 210, 8 levels. Checking his health, Kai saw it was at 44,520. It continued to trickle down by the second as his life bled out. Health potion, Kai rasped to anyone listening. In a bit of panic, Kai chose to put 30 attribute points into vitality, giving him another 300 health. Only it didn't instantly heal him, instead it provided him a longer chance to live, as his health still continued to dwindle, his life leaking out through the many wounds. It was a cheat method to delay death, only temporarily slowing his demise. Kneeling over his prone form, Hector poured liquid into his mouth. Kai sputtered, barely able to breathe under the large beast that lay on his chest. Hector and another student dragged it off him a moment later. After a minute of watching his health dip below 200, the familiar sensation of the healing potion began taking effect. The health continued dropping, but began slowing over time until it eventually stopped. The next minute, it started going back up. He could feel the familiar warmth and itchiness working away at his wounds as they sealed shut. With a weak sigh of relief, Kai closed his eyes as his health reached its new halfway point of 400. Having saved the remaining 10 attribute points in case he needed more vitality, Kai chose to put them into intelligence in a weak attempt to improve the pull of his gravity, since it had seemed wholly ineffective against the Panther. His heavy blow had gone up a level, the first of his skills to do so. The increase would give a small power boost to the skill, making him hit a little harder the next time he used it. Name, Kaismo Cineris. Realm level, Foundation 40. Aspect, Gravity. Class, Vanguard. Race, Human. Health, 403 840. Stamina, 192, 250. Mana, 112 300. Vitality, 80 84. Strength, 50. Dexterity, 30. Endurance, 30. Intelligence, 40. Wisdom, 30. Unspent attributes. Available 0. Active skills. Heavy Blow, 2/10. Gravity Pillar, 1/10. Domain, 1/10. Passive skills. Burden, 1/10. General skills. Identify. Pain tolerance. 1. Sense improvement, 1. Soul presence. 4. Elemental magic resistance. 4. Physical resistance. 4. Still kneeling next to his form, Hector bent his head down and whispered, "I think Jason Grell tried to kill you when you were trapped. One of his air blades hit you in the shoulder. Actually, a lot of them came close. It's not like you were moving much under it, so I doubt it was a mistake." Kai had felt magic hit him during the ordeal. He thought that it was perhaps a misfire. The pain and agony coming from the claws shredding his skin and muscle had been so painful that it dulled most of what else had happened around him. His eyes met Hector's for a moment before giving a subtle nod. He would deal with Jason later. Sitting up, Kai grunted in pain. His body still felt raw. The injuries, despite having healed, felt like they could burst open if he moved too much or too suddenly. With a voice full of energy, the instructor asked, "Well, that certainly was a lot more exciting. Everyone ready to move on?" As it turned out, one student had died during the fight. Zachary, the first student to get mauled, had survived with the assistance and healing abilities of Fred, although barely. The other student, named Casey, had been dragged by his leg into the bushes beyond Kai's vision, only to have been killed. Kai had no doubt the instructor could have saved the young man, but chose not to. I wonder if Garen went through this, or if Dad is aware. Something told him his father would have told him if he had known. Aren't they afraid of backlash? If an important noble's kid dies, then wouldn't he complain to the king? Take vengeance. What the hell are they thinking? Leveling up by way of killing monsters was supposed to be fast and dangerous, but they were still in school, under the supervision of instructors and teachers, so they were supposed to be safe. It seemed incredulous that they would let their own students die and be completely straight with it. Kai knew his mother would destroy the school in anger if he died, or would attempt to do so. With the instructor's unwillingness to intervene, Kai had initially thought they would be using a common ploy for the first expedition, to let the students think they would die so they could judge them and how they perform under such pressures. There was also the fact that a person would gain more levels if the risks were greater, or at least if they believed them to be so. But no, the instructor had let a student die, thus destroying his theories. It seemed barbaric to let an untrained student die during an expedition. It was so entirely pointless. The more Kai thought about it, the more confused and angrier he became. "Everyone," the instructor called out, "I know some of you have been through something harrowing today, but this is the price you must pay to gain strength." He held the corpse in his hands, a cloth covering it. "There are still a few hours left. We will take a vote on whether to continue or not. All who wish to continue to raise your hand." Everyone had voted not to continue. In his heart, Kai wanted to keep going. But he knew he was woefully underprepared. He needed armor, potions, and his health and mana back to full before he could feel confident about fighting out here next time. So the group trekked back to the staging area. Along the way, he kept receiving curious and fearful glances every now and then. Every time he met their gazes, they would immediately look away, almost fearful to be caught looking. "You scare them," Hector whispered alongside him. "What are you talking about?" "I didn't do anything to them." Kai looked around at the other students, but they seemed to be purposefully dodging his gaze. Hector gave Kai an appraising look. "When you were under the beast, during that minute I felt more fearful of you than the Panther. You were terrifying. Under threat of death, you unleashed wrathful savagery that chilled my bones watching." Hector shivered. He brought his hand up to his arm and began rubbing it. "Kai, that monster had over 100 levels on you, and you—" The whole incident was a blur. All Kai remembered was the instinctual desire to live. It had been just like the day he died in his past life. The same feeling of teetering on the edge of death, only to defy and fight to live. Only the last time he did die, the challenge had been too great to overcome. Looking to his side, even Jason was giving him looks of consideration. "Maybe this will get him off my back from now on." After a few minutes of travel, the group arrived at the staging area. Surprisingly, they were not the first group back. "Hector, Kai," Andre called out. His voice sounded tired. His face was smeared with dried blood. He walked toward them with an obvious limp. "Andre, what in the nine happened to your group?" Hector's inquired. Not only Andre, but his entire group also looked like they had been through a long campaign of fighting, even though it had been a few hours. Each was bloody and roughed up in their own right. Andre's armor was slightly marked up, but it was not even close to being as bad as Kai's shredded one. Human, foundation level 26. He gained some levels too. Came across a swarm of needlebirds, nasty little things. Everyone needed a health potion after the fight. One of them got Chloe in the neck. He pointed to a girl whose armor was dyed red. We came back to grab some more health potions before heading back out. While Andre's group looked ragged, they were all joyful and excitedly talking amongst each other. Some imitating moves they had performed, pretending to slash their weapons around as they vanquished their imaginary foes. "How about you guys? Why are you back so soon?" The mood darkened. "Kai almost died, and another student was killed," Hector replied somberly. "What?" Andre looked wide eyes between the two, expecting someone to say, "Just kidding," but when no one did, the realization came across his face. "Is that why you look like that?" Kai nodded his head. His leather chest piece was completely trashed, just shredded strings of leather barely hanging on at this point. The instructor did nothing to protect us. He knowingly took the students into a forging level 35 Grove Panther's territory, knowing full well we were not ready. Kai angrily spouted. His glare turned onto the instructor, who, as if sensing it, turned to Kai mid-conversation and gave his own glare back, unwilling to back down to his student. It took out 2 students before it jumped on Kai. I don't think we could have defeated it without Kai and that vine girl, Hector added on, thumbing the girl crying gently on one of the logs, the others consoling her. That doesn't make sense. Why would they allow students to die? Andre's forehead was creased with worry. That's what I want to know. Kai narrowed his eyes at the instructor, who had resumed talking to the other group's instructor. A few hours later, every group had come back. With the news of the dead student, Andre's group had agreed not to go back out for the day. As more groups came back, word had gone around very quickly about the dead student. Casey had been the only person to die throughout all the groups, it seemed. Kai had been getting a wide berth from many of the students, except for his roommates. Apparently tales of his escapades had been spread around. Students, Sven addressed the groups with a melancholy tone. As I'm sure most of you have heard, today a student, Casey McAdams, died during the field training. Sven paused as the whispering began. He waited until they died down once again. You must be wondering, why? Why didn't the instructor of that group protect and save him? Sven shook his head. I will be completely forthright with you. Because life is filled with unpredictable factors you can't control. You can only do your best to adapt and survive. One group at random every trip will have their instructor commanded not to interfere with the expedition at all. That means he will not save you if you find yourselves in danger. Sven didn't look happy delivering this news. This is a new policy, enacted by the headmistress, but be assured the instructors will not take you to fight anything your group can't handle. Damn it, he heard his roommate whisper. Those of you who do not want to risk your life out here will not be obligated to come on these trips again, Sven said, his voice even. Live and survive or become food. The future is up to you. Now let's return home. On the way back to the academy, the carriage was quiet. Everyone sat in contemplation, thinking about what Sven had informed them. As it turns out, their little adventures would be a lot more dangerous than they had all thought. Now that he thought about it more, it had been stupid to save Hector, as cold as it was to say. When the Panther had jumped at him, he had pushed Hector to the side, blocking the way to the robed mage. He hardly knew the guy and had risked his life to save him. It had been a somewhat unconscious reaction to save Hector. Saving people was something he had done often in his old life. It had been an unstable, turbulent time when many died unnecessarily. He did what he could to help people survive despite the risks, and became a hero along the way, saving many. Ben had been a hero. But Kai couldn't be. He needed to live so he could keep his promise to his family to survive and for his quest for revenge. Because he had been born as Ben and then died and was reborn with his full memories intact, it wasn't a stretch to say he was still Ben in essence, whose memories and experiences molded him into the person he was today. Thus, Ben could be said to be the real him, wrapped in a shiny new paint, masquerading as Kai just because he had lived first. Living as Kai in his new life had undoubtedly influenced him greatly, making new memories and experiences, but his soul and the pain inside definitely belonged to his first life too. He wondered if it was the soul, the very essence of that person that made them who they were, or was it their memories and experiences, or perhaps something else entirely. The soul may have started off as solely belonging to Ben, but now with a different life, he wasn't the same man as before. After all, Ben had died almost 1,250 years ago, and in approximately 10 years, he would have lived longer as Kai than he did as Ben. Whatever the answer, Kai could feel the ever-conflicting emotions of not knowing what the future held. After all, fighting monsters was deadly, and even the idea of revenge felt so far away that it was an impossible dream. But Kai knew deep down he would keep ascending. For better or worse, he could not sit down and enjoy an easy life. The desire to fight, to explore, to enact his revenge would drive him forwards. Chapter 28, Knock Knock. Are you sure you know where you're going? Kai cautiously asked. Yes. For the last time, I know where we are going. Andre laughed off Kai's concern. It was their off day 2 weeks after the miserable field trip, and Kai and Andre had chosen to go out shopping together. Or more accurately, Andre was taking Kai to a blacksmith he knew. He was relying on Andre to navigate through the confusing labyrinth of the city streets. There seemed to be no rhyme or reason to the design of this area in the city. Already he was lost, and wasn't entirely sure he could make his way back to the academy if left on his own. Hector had stayed behind in the academy to attend to his lord, and Sean had opted not to join, doing whatever it was that he did. Sean had to be the most antisocial person that Kai had ever met. He was often absent from his dorm room and the others. Walking alongside his feet, the adorable Akane stopped, picking up her head as she looked around before focusing on a random area in the distance. "Andre," Kai called out, halting his roommate. Confused, Andre turned back to him. Without warning, the ground started shaking. Kai grabbed onto the nearest column, steadying himself. The shaking was strong enough that he thought he might lose his balance. The earthquakes had been ramping up in both intensity and frequency since they had started several years ago. If that wasn't an ominous sign, Kai didn't know what was. Akane stood her ground, glaring into the distance towards the Ashbourne Mountains. Kai figured the earthquake must have originated from there. The shaking ceased a moment later. Without warning, a grey figure blurred overhead, speeding through the air faster than Kai could react. It went in the same direction as to where Akane had been looking. "Do you know who that was?" He turned to Andre, only to find him flat on his arse. "You good?" he asked, amused, putting his hand out. "Yeah, I'm okay." Andre took the extended hand and hauled himself up. "Who are you talking about?" "Never mind," shaking his head. "Are we close to the shop?" "Yay, it's just around the corner." The shop in question was a nondescript building, way off the beaten path. The building remained isolated from the others, which seemed appropriate as smithies were noisy and smelly, and potentially dangerous depending on what projects they worked on. It certainly smelled like a smithy. A distinct odor of coal and metals penetrated Kai's nose. Black soot and other material clung to the outside and roof of the building, begging the question if it had ever received a wash before. "Tell me again why we are coming here and not one of the blacksmith shops near the main street," Kai asked. Andre looked at Kai incredulously. "Are you kidding me? Those places charge a premium for their services and materials. Besides, Knock is just as good as those rip-offs," Andre insisted. "Knock? Hey, don't knock on people's names." Kai groaned, closing his eyes in mental agony. It felt like his head was being attacked without mind magic. The door to the building slammed open. A bear of a man walked through, so large he even made Sven look normal. With eyes that screamed punishment, the man stared at Andre. "You're aware I could hear you, young Belton?" The man gently patted his enormous palm with the head of a hammer larger than Kai's stomach. Kai could hear Andre gulp audibly. "Knock, Come on, kid, you can do better than that." Knock laughed loudly. Walking up to the two, he picked up Andre easily, giving him a mighty squeeze. Turning to Kai, Knock looked him up and down. "This must be your friend." "Yeah," Andre sputtered out of breath, still being squeezed. "I'm Kai." He stared at Andre, who appeared like he was turning blue. Do you think you put him down? He is turning blue." "Oh, oops," Knock said, letting go. "Sorry about that." "You almost knocked me out," Andre said, taking a deep breath. "Better." Knock had a small grin as he scratched his chin with a finger that was as large as Kai's wrist. "Why don't you three come inside?" The interior of the building was quite different from the outside. Cleaner and organized, the inside contained walls filled with all kinds of armor and weapons hanging about. Kai recognized many types of weapons, and some he hadn't ever seen before. Every single item had one thing in common throughout the shop. They were all made of metal, which was no surprise. Even with his untrained eyes, he could tell they were quality works. Interestingly enough, none of them were noticeably enchanted, all laid bare of obvious glyphs and runes. "Those are my display pieces," Knock remarked, noticing Kai's wandering eyes. "You can get an idea of what you are ordering." "They're beautiful work, better than the stuff done at my home," Kai spoke honestly. The giant man tipped his head in thanks. "So, what do I owe the pleasure of your visit, young Belton and friend Kai? Kai here is looking for armor, but he doesn't know what kind. I might be able to help with that." The man rubbed his chin thoughtfully. A young man who wants armor but doesn't know what type he wants. Quite a challenge. But first, rules are rules, Nock said. Andre groaned. Shh, you. For you to commission an item from my shop, you must tell me. A knock-knock joke, he said with all seriousness. Kai burst out laughing. Seriously? Grinning, the man spread his arms. Well, let's hear it. Kai froze. A knock-knock joke? What insanity is this? Is he a child in a giant's body? Think, Kai, think. You have heard some before. What were they? After a minute of silence, Andre nudged him. Kai, I'll tell you one. Nock stalked over, grabbing Andre by the back of his shirt, effortlessly picking him up. No, young Belton, this trial belongs to your friend alone. Kai sighed. He had figured out a joke. He just didn't know if he had enough courage to say it aloud. Knock, knock, he started. Grinning, Nock said, Who's there? Tank. Tank who? The grin got even larger. You're welcome. Kai covered his face, completely embarrassed and cringing inside. On cue, Andre, Akane, and Nock started roaring with laughter. This never leaves the building. Kai stared daggers at the still-hanging Andre. Whatever you say, he smirked. Dropping Andre, Nock clapped once. All righty, now you are officially a customer of Knock'em Down Smithy. Kai sighed. Before we begin, Andre said you did not know of what kind of armor you were looking for. To get an idea, would you tell me your class and element? Of course, it is entirely up to you. If you prefer not, we can proceed, but finding suitable armor will be a little more challenging. It's not necessary? Kai questioned. No, friend Kai, it is not my place to know unless there is an absolute need to. If I may be a braggart for a moment, I am known for my discretion, and many of my clients prefer to remain anonymous, both in name and skills. Kai raised an eye at the statement. I have no issue telling. It's Gravity and Vanguard. Wonderful. Very interesting. Gravity and Vanguard, a beautiful and deadly combination. A true knock-'em-down combination if I ever heard it. Will you be able to help? Kai tentatively asked. Yes, Nock claimed. His face looked troubled, however. Even without knowing your class, based on your physique and sword hanging by your side, you are a melee fighter. I can assume that you are fighting underneath your own gravity. If I'm wrong, please tell me. Nock mused aloud. Kai motioned for him to continue. The problem is that at your level, any kind of metal armor will weigh you down significantly. Depending on which style of metal armor you wear, it will encumber your movement as well. That is not even taking gravity magic into account, which will add to your burden. Your body is simply not strong enough to handle a full plate armor at this time, even without gravity. He couldn't help but frown. It wasn't the answer he had come seeking. When will I be ready for such armor? Probably in the forging realm, the large man guessed, scratching his head with the large hammer still in his hand. Kai sighed with relief. The forging realm wasn't too far away. I find it intriguing that you also use a sword despite possessing gravity magic. While not ideal, it can still work when applied correctly. The idea of using other weapons intrigued Kai, but it wasn't something at the top of his to-do list at the moment. Due to the nature of your element, I'm afraid I need to ask two things of you. The first is a demonstration of your gravity magic. On me, I'm afraid, I need to get an idea for how much you currently increase gravity by, so I can determine which metal would be ideal. Kai wordlessly obliged by activating domain in the entire foundry. Kai stood tall against the increased weight and pull, trying to bring his body down to the ground. His body was slowly becoming more accustomed to the feeling of it as he got stronger and used his spells more often. Andre leaned forward as if he was going to fall before he caught himself with a step forward. Nock remained unmoving, not even a blink or lean, as the massive man's weight increased. Lifting his hammer up and down like a curling weight, Nock silently examined it. I see, he muttered. He placed the hammer down on a small platform of metal. Nock's eyes shifted below the hammer, something Kai couldn't see from his angle. You are increasing gravity by approximately 80% of what it already is, meaning you have almost doubled the weight for everything in your boundary. Deactivating the spell, Kai's eyes lit up. You can tell how much the weight increased? He asked excitedly. Nock bobbed his head once. When you work as long as I in this business, you get a feel for many things. The hammer I was holding is the same one I've used for 30 years. I know everything about it, including its weight, so it's simple enough to tell how much it's increased. He coughed into his hand twice. And I have a device to measure weight. He gestured to the weird object under the hammer. The hammer in question was a massive thing, with sigils and glyphs running up the side of its dark brown handle and the silver head. It looked like it weighed more than him. If he is right, and the increased gravity of my domain ability increased the hammer's weight by approximately 80% at 40 intelligence. Wouldn't that mean at 50 intelligence, the forces of gravity would essentially be doubled? Is it possible the gravitational forces of my domain and pillar will be increased by 100% for every 50 intelligence? Is it really that simple? I will easily be able to calculate that as my intelligence rises. What about other planets? I can't imagine every planet has the same gravitational pull, so will my modifier remain the same? Wait. I forgot about my passive class ability and my general skills. Negative forces of pressure and gravity are lessened by 10% for you. Magic resistance 4. Physical resistance 4. The effects of my gravity are already lowered by 10% on my body passively. And my general skills, do they apply to my own magic? They should. Even though I'm creating gravity via magic, the element itself is physical in nature. Physical resistance 4 should be improving my body by an additional 40% against it. Would my body break on me if I didn't have those two effects lessening the burden of my magic? Would I even be able to move? I'm getting a headache. I received some answers but came out with more questions. Nock, do you mind if I cast another gravity ability on you to confirm the strength of it? Amused, Nock nodded. Kai used gravity pillar over Nock. Again, the man looked unfazed. Does that weigh any differently? He asked. It's the same, Nock responded. He had been certain domain and gravity pillar both had the same modifier, but he wanted to make sure. That makes it easy. And my spells overlapping each other don't seem to combine their forces too, which I already knew. It's obvious we need to use a lightweight metal you can wear that is also sturdy enough to hold its shape and not break down to the pressure of your gravity. Unfortunately, that eliminates most materials in my shop. There are plenty of other metals around that would work, but I'm afraid they are difficult to get. Most are only available on different planets, and they are certainly expensive. Kai's shoulders sunk with each edition of bad news. Lucky for us, there is one metal in my shop that will work for this project. Nock gave a winning smile, making Kai just notice one of his teeth was missing. The massive hammer vanished into thin air, likely into a storage item, but Kai couldn't see any jewelry on the man. In its place, a block of metal appeared. It appeared dullish greyish white, but instead of reflecting the light around the room, it seemed to absorb it. The enchantments giving light to the room dimmed the instant the block was brought out. Kai was fascinated. The metal seemed almost mystical, dampening the lighting of the room. It was difficult to tell, but white wisps seemed to be swirling around the outside of the ingot, giving it an almost ethereal property. The wisps became more pronounced the longer it absorbed the light. "What is it?" he asked. "Alderlight." "Whoa, that is really rare. How the heck did you get some?" Andre asked, his voice full of awe. "A payment for a job," Nock responded vaguely. "What is it?" "I've never heard of this metal before," Kai asked. He really didn't know much about metals. In fact, the material, cold iron that made up his sword, was the first time he had ever heard of it too. "I've heard it is used in the holy city of Zanilia." "Zanilia? Isn't that the only city with a world teleporter on New Earth?" "That's the one. Alderlight has a durability stronger than steel and weighs just about the same. As you noticed, the lights darkened slightly when I took out the ingot. Its special property is that when it absorbs light, its weight lessens," Nock supplied with a grin. "Seems perfect, no?" "What about the fact that the suns are almost perpetually covered in this dreary kingdom?" Andre pointed out, darkening Kai's joyous mood with straight facts. "Well, there is that." Nock's smile quickly turned into a frown. "How much increased gravity can this take before it's compromised?" Kai asked, getting back on track. "Dunno, you're my first gravity magic customer, and I've never worked with the stuff before. Should be exciting to find out," answered Nock, an infectious smile back on the giant man's face. I'm interested, Kai said. It sounded like he didn't have any other options, short of some kind of hide or leather. Great, beamed Noct. One small problem, however, he said, holding up a single beefy finger. I don't have enough Alderlight to make you a full set of armor, which I wouldn't recommend. It would simply be too heavy for your body at this time. A breastplate and a helmet will be critical for your protection, so those are obvious choices. Shoulder pads are a must as well. I believe I should have enough raw material to make you shin guards, arm braces, and a kind of tassets for upper thigh protection. You're going to have a lot of open gaps and vulnerable spots throughout your armor, but your most critical areas will be protected. You will have to figure it out for yourself, but supplementing those areas with different armor might throw off the balance or reduce your flexibility, since it won't be one perfect set. Also, any other armor type would be increased under the weight of your gravity. I would suggest picking up enchanted cloth material. Something lightweight, sturdy, and thin enough that can be worn under your Alderlight. Kai nodded. He was beyond happy at the moment. Nock grinned. Right, the last item before we measure you is payment. Kai felt himself begin to sweat a little. He had forgotten about payment. A rare exotic imported metal is surely going to cost a lot. And I have no idea if I am even going to be getting a good deal. Surely it can't cost more than a full year of school. The cost of everything with the friend discount, and because I am experimenting with this metal, will come out to be about 80 gold total. Kai's face dropped. Shit, that's more than the entire school year. Kai looked to the quiet Andre, hoping to get some help. Andre shrugged. I don't know the price of Alderlight armor, but I would take the deal, Kai. You need it, and I'm sure he's giving you a massive deal. I've known Nock a long time, and I've seen him charge much more for less. Fine, he said with a nod. Deal, half today, half on pickup. Now let's get you measured. Chapter 29. Temple. 2 months. You're lucky it's only 2, could have been more. He's working with a new material imported from a different planet. Only the smiths in the holy city of Zanilia are familiar enough to properly work the metal. Nock's good, but strictly speaking, his metal of choice is either steel or ashwraith, Andre told Kai, and he has other projects going on. I get it, I just don't like it. We have another 2 expeditions coming up until my armor will be completed. If you had fought that Panther, you'd be in a huff about having proper armor too. I'll take your word for it. I haven't fought anything above the Foundation realm yet, Andre said. At least Nock gave you some leather hide in the meantime. Kai gave him a side-eye look. This leather looks worse than the crap my dad left me with. It's not going to hold up to another Panther or something similar. The so-called armor was basically tanned animal hide, thinner than his old armor if that was even possible. In most circumstances, his old leather armor probably would have been fine for most of his first year. If he had only fought Foundation realm monsters like he was supposed to and hadn't had some idiot's vines pulling the monster into his body, it probably would have held up fine for a few more trips. It's not meant to. You're not supposed to be jumping power realms when fighting. It will hold up fine against Foundation realm enemies. Just try and avoid anything higher for the next 2 months. Kai couldn't help rolling his eyes at the obvious statement. He had no intention of fighting something so far beyond him again. Hey, we are going to be passing by the temple in a sec. Do you mind if we make a quick detour? Andre asked Kai. Temple? Questioned Kai. Place of worship belonging to the gods? Andre looked at Kai's confused face. The Divine Nine, the beings who brought humans to the Myriad of Worlds. Oh, I thought you meant the other gods, Kai said. Other gods? I don't think there are any more gods other than the 9. Do people not believe in Christianity, Buddhism, Islam, or any of the other religions anymore? I remember it was a huge point of contention for many. Beings claiming to be gods took humans to a new magical world. Of course, many had their faith shaken during those days, real, tangible gods that created a miracle. The religion of the 9 had only just begun when I was a child, and had not yet gained popularity like the others. Honestly, I forgot that was a thing until now. We didn't have any churches or temples in the village either, now that I think about it. I guess I'll check it out. Sure, I'm curious to see what a temple looks like, Kai responded. Before the temple, a large empty square of paved white stone surrounded a huge water fountain. Beyond the foundation, a grand staircase led from the square to a pair of giant wooden doors. Each could easily fit knock without issue, which was impressive. Kai had honestly expected a temple for each of the 9 gods. Instead, it was a single large opulent building. Whereas the royal palace looked like a castle, the temple appeared a white marble divine cathedral. Mosaic windows lined the outside walls, each filled with legendary-looking figures in epic stances or battles. Kai could only assume they were the gods depicted on the glass, but who knew if they were realistic images or some artist taking theatrical liberties? People were scattered all around the square. Some were talking in hushed whispers, a few sat on the fountain's edge reading. Kai even recognized a few from his classes. Apparently, they too were visiting the temple like him on their day off. An older man dressed in a dark red robe, lined with gold trimmings and a blue stole hanging around his neck, was sweeping away at the square with a broom. Kai couldn't help but think the man was being punished. At the rate he was going, it would take all day to sweep half the square. Inside is an area for each of the gods, and a separate area if you wish to pray to all at once, Andre informed him. Do the gods make appearances? Kai asked. He had never seen a god before. I've never heard of one appearing here, Andre shook his head. Heard rumors they do make an appearance sometimes, but it's mostly on other planets. There is a rumor the gods reside on Titan Prime, on a mountain so tall they can see everything. Actually, depending on the alignment of the planets, you could even see the mountain clearly from here, if only we had a cloudless sky for once. A pantheon on top of the tallest mountain. Sounds like Olympus, Kai thought aloud. Olympus? Andre turned his head in question. Ah, never mind. I'm going to go inside. Are you coming? He heard Akane's whimper. In a minute, he said to Andre. All right, I'll meet you inside. Kai watched Andre walk up the stairs into the temple, vanishing from sight. Akane whimpered again. Kai guessed she was hungry as usual. I know you are hungry. We will pick up some food on the way back. Kai kneeled down, rubbing his hand down her back in a calming motion. Though I'm the one who needs to be calmed down. Between Akane's eating tendencies and the armor, I'm going to be broke soon. Gods. He was a little conflicted. He was aware that the gods existed. His own parents in his first life even claimed to have witnessed them, but he himself had never seen them. It hadn't been important to him to worship or pray to these so-called divine mythical figures because other things had been more important at the time. Who cared about some absentee gods who dropped them onto a planet with monsters and then fucked off? A trial, they called it. What kind of trial causes 1/4 of the humans to die in the first 10 years? And what is a god in any case? Many different faiths describe their gods differently. Is a god an omnipotent transcendent being capable of creating anything, or a deity operating on a smaller scale? What kind of gods are the 9? Creating the Myriad of Worlds was certainly an act that Kai could not fathom, but the same could be said of beings capable of wiping out cities in minutes. Their unfathomable power might as well be divine to him. The 9 had claimed to have created over 1,000 planets, multiple suns, and countless moons all orbiting around a central planet, like a solar system, just on a much denser scale. If that wasn't an act of God, then what is? But if the 9 were truly gods, why would they allow so many humans who came to the Myriad of Worlds to die in those first 25 years? And the unknown enemy that had warranted the relocation of the willing humans, was that not something the gods could take handle? Excuse me, young one, an elderly voice spoke. To his side, the old man who had been sweeping stood looking at him, broom no longer in hand. Yes? Kai had not been paying attention. He had been petting Akane and thinking, I couldn't help but hear you speak of Olympus with these old ears. It's not every day I hear someone refer to the old gods. Kai was surprised. Despite the withered, wrinkled face, the man's purple-colored eyes were bright and clear. You know of Olympus? Are you a human who originated from Earth? I'm afraid not. Oh, I apologize. I assumed. Kai spoke truthfully. Oh, that's new. He looks so unassuming. There's not a shred of aura or power radiating from him, and yet I can't identify him. Somehow he can block his race from showing too. The man laughed. It's not a problem. I do look quite old, don't I? A few coughs racked his withered body. He pounded his chest to clear it away. It is intriguing to find someone knowledgeable about the Greek gods. They were believed to be mythological figures long before the transition to this place. Even more interesting to find one so young discussing it. Perhaps you are a human from Earth instead. The old man smiled lightly. No, Kai laughed. I'm afraid I'm only 16. Kai told a half-truth. His mother had technically been pregnant with him early on when they came to the Myriad of Worlds, so in a way that counted as being from Earth. 16? I apologize. I thought perhaps you were an old soul like me. Kai was inwardly shocked. That statement had hit close to home. I have an interest in history, he said. I'm Kai, and this is Akane. Ah, introductions. I'm afraid it has been a long time since I have met anyone new. Usually, I only converse with my brothers and sisters. Alex, priest of the Nine, at your service, young one. He offered a bony hand, which Kai shook. Akane was somehow balancing on his shoulder now. She held out a paw, which Alex took and shook gently. A sandwich appeared, summoned from thin air into the hands of Alex. Help yourself. I could hear your stomach growling, little one. Alex spoke to Akane. Without pausing, Akane devoured the sandwich right out of Alex's hand. Whimpering a little more, Alex summoned another sandwich which was instantly eaten. She jumped off Kai's shoulder into the arms of Alex. Akane, Kai screamed, surprised at her sudden action, betrayed over food. Giving a little laugh. It's quite all right, Alex said. It's a pleasure to meet both of you. Quite a pair you make. With introductions out of the way, perhaps I could interest you both a tour inside. Blinking, Kai was surprised. I would be honored. Akane yapped once in her agreement. What do you know of the Nine? Asked Alex. Not much, Kai answered honestly. We didn't have any temples where I lived dedicated to the Nine or any other gods. Oh, and why not? Kai could only shrug in response. It wasn't something he knew or even thought about until now. There were shrines, but they were dedicated to the foxes. But you know of the Olympians? Questioned Alex. Kai shrugged again. Only their names and powers. That's more than most. The two stopped right outside the large doors leading into the temple at the top of the stairs. The old man seemed to glide up the stairs without any issues. The 12 Olympians were considered the main deities of ancient Greece. Each god represented an aspect of the world or life. For example, Zeus was the god of the sky, and his daughter Artemis goddess of the hunt. Together the Olympians ruled over many aspects of the humans, judging or bestowing them boons or curses. They would gather and discuss events and ideas on a glorious mountain named aptly Mount Olympus. In a way, this is very similar to the Nine and their seats of power on the celestial mountain. Each of the Nine represents a core foundation of reality similar to the ideological symbolism of the Olympians. Alex turned away from Kai and began treading inside. Kai followed behind at a step. The air changed the moment he stepped through the threshold, stopping him. His body began to feel lighter, like his burdens and anger were dissipating into the void. A gently calm settled over his mind, relaxing it as a warmth settled into existence in the very core of his body. He was still very aware of his surroundings. Alex had stopped and watched him with interest. Kai's eyes closed as he embraced the feeling. This feels nice. Almost like when Mum used to hold me. His mind felt like it was floating on clouds. Everything was slower around him, but also clear and focused. His thoughts turned to Lucian. Why did you betray me? Logically, he felt that he should forgive, or rather forget. It had been over 1,200 years since the events of that day. His parents were gone. He knew he held on to the resentment and anger because it gave him purpose, something to strive for. It just makes no sense. Unconsciously, Kai's hands clenched into fists, just as a sharp sting pricked his very core. His eyes flashed open. Wait, this isn't right. Kai's chest heaved like his stamina had dropped immensely. He felt his mind return to normal. Alex had a downright shocked expression on his face. His mouth was wide and his eyes large, eventually turning into a furrowing of his brow as he turned contemplative. You resisted it. I don't know if that is impressive or disturbing for someone your level and age. Either your soul and will are powerful, or you harbor a deep resentment right down to your core that the magic of this building cannot help with. I'm sorry I didn't warn you. Many come here to alleviate their sorrows or fury and reflect on it for a time. What is it? I've never heard of anything messing with my mind and body like that before. It forced my feelings to change. I remembered my anger, but it felt like it was at the back of my mind, separated in a way. It was as if I could look at my anger objectively, without my emotions clouding my mind for a moment at least, until I remembered why I was so angry. Akane appeared unaffected. She sat on the ground, looking at the two as she listened to their conversation. Alex looked at Kai with eyes of pity. To be so young and harbor such feelings deep in your soul, truly a scar against your very being. This building, Alex held his hands wide, doing a quick spin, assists many every day. Its purpose is multifaceted. It is primarily a structure dedicated to the gods, so people can pray, hold sermons, or feel closer to them. Another purpose is to give people clarity and time to think independently about events or ideas, without the mess of emotions interfering. And the last is the healing of the soul. Healing magic cannot restore the soul. It takes soul magic to do so. It always hits those who enter there first time the hardest. So will it heal my soul if I stand inside? Kai asked. Alex shook his head. I'm afraid not. Some wounds are too deep or dire for the power of this building to heal. The moment you awoke from your trance, the magic immediately stopped working on you. Your body, mind, and soul now passively resist the magic of this building, for it isn't powerful enough to aid you. Are there stronger temples or places of worship that can heal me then? Kai's eyes shone with hope. There are many, some on this planet, numerous on others. Perhaps a stronger temple could help you. But Kai, I suspect it is not physical damage to your soul that hurts you, but an injury to your spirit. These temples will not magically make the scars in your heart or spirit vanish forever. Only temporarily, until you leave the building or the magic fades inside. It is up to you to forgive or forget. Fades inside? The magic is designed to reduce its effectiveness over time. In a matter of half an hour, it would be gone, no longer affecting you. In a day or so, the magic will be capable of affecting you once again. But beware, as many have done before, come too often in a short period of time, and the magic's effects will lessen the moment you enter until it eventually affects you no more. You must either seek out a stronger place of worship or wait a long time. In any case, once you leave the confines of this building, your mind returns to what it once was. So would I remember stuff I thought up in here once I leave? Kai. Of course, your mind is your own. It will be up to the individual to choose what to do with the knowledge or enlightenment they gain inside if their time spent has been fruitful, Alex answered. His voice portrayed a tone of stating the obvious. Now, I believe we have some gods to meet, shall we? Chapter 30. The Nine. Kai followed Alex into the building. To the right, Kai could see a large room beyond the doorway straight ahead, but Alex was taking him through a corridor to the right side. The elderly man's sandals left no noise on the marbled tiled floor, while Kai winced at every step of his as he proceeded through what was the once a silent hallway. Following along the two was Akane, who similarly made no noise when walking. The building has 3 floors and a basement, although the first floor is the one used most often. I'm sure you wondered about that massive room we skipped. No need to worry, as we will return there. I wanted to show you these rooms. They are most often used for reflection and contemplation. As I explained, the magic helps the mind separate emotions and events, so these rooms are used for that purpose. People are able to think there without being bothered. Anyone can come inside and use them if they so wish during their time here. Coming out of one of the rooms ahead, a man dressed similarly to Alex began walking, passing the 3, paying no attention as he rushed down towards where they had just come from. Yep. You know, you never told me how you know about the Olympians, Kai remarked. Books, discussions. I've found the subject of deities outside the Myriad of Worlds to be quite fascinating. I've often found myself contemplating if they were real, or just mythological figures created because people feared the unknown. There is no evidence to suggest that the Olympians ever truly existed outside the minds in which they were believed to be real. Alex's tone was one of thoughtfulness. Is that not blasphemy for a priest of the Nine to be so interested in other gods? Some may see it that way, he said. What do you believe? Were gods outside of the Nine real? Did they truly ever exist? Do gods have to be physically present to truly exist? Kai asked. Alex halted. Explain, he said with a toothy grin. Does it matter if their gods don't physically exist? If they are believed to be real, then who are we to say otherwise? Kai sighed. I don't know if the other gods genuinely existed outside of this place. He lifted his arms and did a slow circle. But if the Nine are real, then why can't the others also exist? Then where were they in the humans' time of need? With a surprising tone of vexation, Kai could only remain silent at that. Wait, time of need? Does he mean the reason why the Nine brought humans to the Myriad of Worlds? Perhaps there was never a need for them to show, or maybe the Nine made up the story about the great enemy, Kai said thoughtlessly. Suddenly he was on all fours, throwing up the next instant. His vision had changed. They had been standing in the long temple hallway. The next second, they were in a black void with nothing else around. There was only darkness. Even under his feet, there was no indication there was any floor. It was as if he was standing on pitch black. He couldn't tell where the room ended. The measure of distance didn't seem to exist. Although there was no light, all three of their figures were perfectly visible in the darkness. Akane was on the floor of darkness, growling at Alex, her back arched, ready to fight. Alex's silver eyes shone brightly as he glared down at Kai. The next second, the void vanished, replaced by the familiar hallway. You speak of matter you do not know, young Kai. I would not have you insult the gods who have sacrificed so much for the resident of these worlds. The tone of authority was undeniable. It was clear that he would not accept any further questions of the Nine's motives. Gasping for breath, he said, I'm sorry. His body felt weak. He felt liquid running down his cheeks. Tears. He touched his face, pulling away his hand. It was covered in red. Blood. Health, 352-840. The reality of the situation set in. Alex looked horrified. I apologize. It's been a long time since I've talked to others who challenged. I forgot we were having a theoretical discussion. Here, please drink this. A vial appeared in Alex's hand. Kai identified the object. Greater health potion. He had never seen one higher than the standard version before. This was wasted on him, for it was meant to heal someone far stronger, but he would accept it regardless. Reaching out, he hesitantly took the vial from Alex. Still kneeling on the floor, Akane looked at him with eyes of concern, a little whimpering breaking the silence. She looked fine, but it was difficult to tell through his blurry vision. With shaky hands, he attempted to uncork the vial, only to fail, lacking strength in his trembling hands. Putting the vial up to his mouth, he grasped the cork with his teeth before he pulled them apart. Spitting out the cork, he chugged the potion. The effects immediately began working. His body felt better. Seeing his health tick up rapidly, Kai looked up at Alex. The old man looked remorseful, his eyes watching Kai with concern. You almost killed me, Kai accused. Alex bowed his head. An accident, I assure you. I can only give you my word that I didn't attack you directly. Kai gave the man a glare before he turned to Akane. Is Akane okay? Kai asked. He ran his hand down her back. Whatever magic Alex had used didn't seem to affect her. She is fine. It hardly affected her at all, he said. I am terribly sorry. I almost committed a grave sin. Alex's silver eyes shimmered with unshed tears. No, it was a grave sin. I should go, Kai said. His health had already gone back to full, but he still felt shaky. I understand. Alex bowed his head. Before you leave, I ask you please forgive this one. I won't hold it against you if we can finish that tour, Kai said, surprisingly Alex and even himself. Truly? Alex asked, his eyes wide. Kai nodded. He found himself liking Alex, and unless Alex was a superb actor, he had seemed genuinely sorry for what happened. Besides, Kai's heart was full enough of anger and revenge. He didn't need to add to his burdens. You are blessed to have such a guardian. Despite knowing it was a battle she could not win, Akane was willing to fight me had I not stopped my magic. It is truly commendable to see a bond of love between a fox and her pup. Kai looked to Akane, who appeared bashful. She wasn't making eye contact with him, in fact, she was staring at a wall, causing Kai to chuckle. After another 20 seconds of walking, they approached the end. There was a pair of double doors to his left already opened. Beyond the doorframe was that massive room he had glimpsed from earlier. Instead of entering through the back of the room, they had now come in from the side but closer to the front. Walking inside, Kai was in awe. 9 massive statues were strategically placed at the front in a half circle. Many pews lined the room, all facing the statues. An altar and chairs had been placed in between the statues and the pews. The room was nearly empty, except for the occasional person sitting down in the pews. There are smaller statues nearby, where we entered the building for people who want to make a quick prayer, but I thought you would appreciate these. This room is commonly used for marriages or sermons. In fact, the Ash Monarch was married to his second wife in this room, some 250 years ago. Alex tilted his head questioningly. The room looked like it could seat 5,000 without issue. Must have been a lot of guests, Kai dryly remarked. I imagine so. This lowly one is just a caretaker of sorts. I had not been invited. They approached the furthest marble statue to the right. It was immense. Not only was the statue 10 times larger than Kai, but the aura radiating from it was palpable enough to feel physically. Noxol, the guide of death. The figure was mysterious. Draped in a robe and hood, a shadow was cast over the face, making the details difficult to figure out. Kai coughed into his hand once. Pulling it away, he noticed red specks. Checking his health, Kai noticed it was dropping by the second. Even though it's a statue, the death magic emitted is no joke. Let's move on. Kai let out a sigh of relief as the feeling of death stopped a few meters away. The next statue was the second tallest and the brawniest. He wore nothing but pants, with his arms crossed over his bare chest. The being looked downright demeaning, as if everything was beneath his consideration. Tusks jutted out of the mouth upwards, giving him a more feral look. Verdict, judge of the soul. His law is unquestionable. He is the most active of the gods among the mortals. He commonly resides on a few planets, but primarily in the orc homeworld of Tabaskian. Omni, the engineer of magic. Omni appeared half the size of the others. A massive bushy beard ran down from his face to his belt. 2 straps came up over his shoulders in what looked like overalls. A hammer with a handle larger than Kai's body was in his hand, looking very similar to the one used by Nock, just larger, much larger. Again, an aura radiated from the statue, but there was nothing detrimental about it. Dwarf? Questioned Kai. Yea. The first female goddess was next. The next statue had a lithe figure compared to the others. She wore a simple toga down to her feet. The hair was in a single interweaving braid going down her back. The ears looked pointed, which, if his guess was correct, appeared like elves according to the lore his first mother told him. Adara, the keeper of time, Alex informed him. Be careful standing near this statue for too long. Time passes a little differently near it. He could feel it. His hand was moving quicker than he was intending. It reminded him of Lucian and his time magic. Considered the most beautiful of the gods, she closely resembles an elf, and is their favorite to worship. Is there any importance to the order they are in? Kai asked. Not particularly. It depends on which race's place of worship you end up visiting. In the human kingdoms, they tend to have the more human-looking ones in the middle. Alex shrugged. It's just the way it is. Go to the Orcs' temple and Verdict would be smack in the middle. Also, sometimes it depends on their symbolism, I guess, too. Noxol isn't too popular being the god of death. He empathized the last part. Now the middle, Ecos, creator of the elements. The statue depicted a handsome young human man, a sharp, angular face under a very pointy wizard hat. Even with the marble covering up much of the details, he could still tell it was an extremely opulent robe, tied with a rope at the waist. In his hand was an orbed staff. The man was holding it out in the air, like he was casting a spell. Kai felt the air cool on one side of his body, while the other side got hotter. It started to become uncomfortable after a few seconds, forcing him to move on. Alex had a knowing smirk. Dahlia, the Warden of Life, the favorite of many humans and other species alike. Called the mother of all life, she is a gentle being who cares greatly for the life of all kinds. The aura around the statue radiated life magic. The health Kai had lost began to gradually restore. Wait, she looks human too. But why? The gods predate humanity. Did she create us? But I thought humans evolved from primates. Why is she human? Kai asked. Alex burst out laughing. Excellent. He bent down and slapped his knee. I was wondering if you would catch on to that. Take a guess. I can think of two. Either she created humans, which from what I've learned of human origins is probably not the right answer, or she can change her appearance. Kai's eyes went wide. They all can. Alex nodded at Kai with a proud smile. Right. From ancient texts, Dahlia used to appear as a dryad before the humans arrived. Some 300 years ago, she began appearing as a human for reasons unknown, Alex said. It is a great honor for the god appearance to take after one of the races, and believe me, they don't change often. Many are upset with the humans for having two gods take shape as them. The new favorite children, they call the humans. Kai's eyes caught on the next statue. Is that a dragon? Kai questioned. Of sorts, answered Alex. Salvandan, the Counselor of Order, appears as a dragonkin, one of the strongest of the sentient races. Kai could feel a pressure descending on him. It felt domineering. The sheer power that radiated from it suppressed his breathing. Kai felt so small compared to the being, his mind going blank, unable to think or move. Let's move on. Alex grabbed him by the sleeve and pulled him away. Xander, custodian of space, he said. The statue was the most confusing to look at. 1 second the statue appeared far away, as if on the edge of his vision. The next it was so close that he could reach his hand out and touch it. It seemed like it kept shifting about moving through space. Taking a step back out of the range of the aura, the statue lay dormant, not moving or looking as if it had moved. No longer in the aura range, he got a good look at it. The figure was clothed in a cloak and hood, but the face was undeniably some kind of animal. His face looked similar to a cat, like the Grove Panther he had fought, but with more human features mixed in. He might be the shyest of the lot, seeing as how he has made the least number of appearances to date. I think it was 4 confirmed sightings last time I checked. But he has given much to the mortals of this world. He is the one who held the portals stable when mortals were transferred to the Myriad of Worlds from their original planets. He also designed the world teleporters to bring sentient beings between worlds here in the Myriad of Worlds. And his other notable but least known gift is the natural causeways between worlds. Natural causeways? Kai questioned. He of course knew of the teleporters between worlds and cities. Most worlds had a few world teleporters capable of transportation between worlds, while most kingdoms or countries had local teleporters that only worked between those on the same planet. The local teleporter in the Ashbourne Kingdom has been offline ever since the war began. Those were common knowledge, but Kai had never heard of natural causeways before. They are gateways between worlds. They exist randomly, scattered across the worlds, allowing for monsters to roam between planets. Alex must have noticed Kai's face. Not to worry, most monsters do not use them. They are dangerous even for them. From what I've heard, powerful monsters make their homes outside the causeways, so unsuspecting prey may come to them through it. Walking towards the next statue, Kai felt nothing. No aura could be felt, which was odd considering everyone before had some kind of presence. The face looked human, but 2 massive horns extended out of the head, slicked towards the back of the skull. The last of the 9 is Lafin, the artist of chaos, appearing as a demon lord of the demon race. Not a shred of aura radiated from the statue. He felt nothing unlike the others. Kai felt a hand on his shoulder. Alex grasped him and pulled him away from the statue. Don't get near that one until you're stronger. He's a bit of a prankster. Thankfully, no one has ever died, but we have had people require a healer occasionally. Kai blinked. The statue, which had a neutral face, now appeared to have a frown. He took an extra step back, just in case, prompting a laugh from Alex. Hey, Kai, he heard from behind. Turning, he saw Andre walking towards him. Andre, finished your business? Yea, over 2 hours ago. Where in the 9 have you been? Kai's body went cold. 2 hours. How it hasn't even been 30 minutes since we split up. 2 hours. You're not joking? No. Andre looked concerned. Kai turned to where Alex had been standing, but the spot was empty. Frowning, he searched around and couldn't see the old man. Akane patted him on the head with her paw. What the? Let's get back to the academy. Dinner will be over soon if we don't hurry.